Boom, baby, we're live. Welcome to the Tokyo Crypto Show, episode number 119, where we are going to review principles for dealing with a changing world order by Ray Dalio. What's up, guys? It is me, Jonathan, from Modern Life Dating. I'm here with my co-host, Charlie, from cultivatecrypto.com. How you doing today, Charlie?
Yeah, things are going all right. The price of Bitcoin, it looks like, jumped a little bit below 20K for a brief period of time there. So we were talking about this on my show yesterday, which is essentially when Bitcoin's under 20, when Ethereum's under 1100 or definitely under 1000. I mean, it's a super great buy opportunity long term, right?
Yep.
Obviously, we're not encouraging people quite yet in this current cycle to be jumping in, going into the end of this current 60-day cycle. We have a pretty good shot at, I think, like a really, really good buy opportunity coming up here in early to mid-July. And then we'll see kind of where things bounce. And then, September seems to me like one of the better buy opportunities. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of like going back in time a little bit when everybody thinks Bitcoin's dead. Those are the best times to get in, best times to be paying attention.
Yeah. And, I think that the purpose of today's show is going to kind of bring a little bit of a sober voice of reason to everybody out there. Like I said, during the peak of the bull market, I kind of got some bullshit from the audience in the chat when I said, guys, like, this easy money is not going to be here forever. And here we are. And, every time I had people booking consultations, multiple people telling me, hey, should I quit my job? I've just made, I just took my portfolio to $1 million, several figures, 7 figures. I want to walk into my boss's office and like throw a fucking coffee in his face and tell him to go to hell. And I'm like, listen, dude, this party's going to come to an end, man. Don't do that. And a lot of people got ahead of themselves. They quit their jobs and stuff. And that was just like the mania over the mania side. Now we're having guys in extreme depression. The people on Reddit are, posting like, certain hotlines to call in case you want to yourself. And so it's getting bad on that side. So we do want to talk about what is happening right now in regards to the reserve currency of the world, which is the United States dollar. I think a lot of people don't really know what the previous world currency, reserve currency was, and the one before that as well. And Ray Dalio put out a video on March 3rd with 15 million views. And I watched this in its entirety, and Charlie has as well. And we really just thought to bring, again, like just a sober voice to the members of the Moon Gang and the Hot Dude Army. Like I said, guys, we're here for you, hard times and good times. Like we're not disappearing. We're not gonna be like, okay, we're the show's over, we're gonna go start like a prank YouTube channel or whatever. We're here.
2.0.
What's that?
I said Jackass 2.0.
Oh, Jackass 2.0. Yeah, because there's other people out there. Like I remember, like during some of the people I watched during like the 2017 bull run, like remember that guy Doug Polk, and he was like talking about he knew everything, and he was the man, and coming out with crypto videos daily, and then he just quit and he gave up, after it was no longer sexy to be a Bitcoin guy.
Yeah,
and
totally changed what
totally
you do on your channel.
The only change that you're going to see from me and Charlie is we're going to get better, because we are working nonstop behind the scenes. We have established weekly meetings now. We are constantly looking at market data. We're constantly looking at ways to expand and grow. We're constantly looking at how to optimize our delivery to you guys so that you can get the best results. And every single day, we're here working hard. So between the two of us, I think we're probably the most consistent. I know that I am the most consistent streamer in like the manosphere or whatever the hell you want to place me in, red pill sphere, men's self-improvement sphere, since January 21st, 2019. I've been live streaming a minimum 5 days a week, sometimes 7 days, sometimes an entire month in a row. Charlie has been doing 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, like 5 days a week since like was it, like
beginning of
like late
2020.
2000, like 2020, yeah.
Yep, early 2020.
Early,
Yep.
so early 2020, and so we're not going anywhere. I'm building the set. I'm getting new mics. I'm going to be moving to another apartment soon, like a larger studio. We're going to optimize Charlie's studio too when I get back from. I'm going on vacation, and my flight leaves in 8 hours, and so I'm going to take a break. I'm going to go there for a couple days. I already paid for this vacation in advance. I paid for the vacation, everything in like early May. And so just gonna go out there, have a good time, and then we'll be back. Charlie, you still going? You're gonna be going to the United States, and then you have your show tomorrow and all that jazz.
Yep.
Yep. So we're here. We're here. We're not going anywhere. So looks like Jerome Powell speaking in 2 minutes apparently. Um,
It's funny. I just pulled up because the topic today, is really interesting with the New World Order discussion with Ray Dalio. I actually just pulled up a video that I remembered from Jerome Powell talking about, part of the New World Order, right, is the central bank digital currencies that are coming out.
Yep.
Yeah. So we'll get into that if we want to share that clip as well. It's about 40 seconds. We can do that either during the video, after the video. But yeah, there's a lot of changes around the corner that I think a lot of people, the people who are not paying close attention to the shift, especially, there's kind of two shifts we're talking about here today, right? The shift with how cryptocurrency kind of fits into this quote unquote new world order, but then also how it's going to change kind of the geopolitical landscape, both in finance as well as other areas, going forward. So I think if you walk and ask somebody just normally on the street, do you know what a central bank digital currency is, or anything like that? Like, I guarantee you, most people are pretty uneducated about this. I've actually had several consultations with people who, work in the United States government, and they're like, you guys don't know how good, and important this talking about this information is, because I do this series called Digital Currency Wars, essentially, right? Basically just talking about how cryptocurrency is permeating both, obviously for the individual, for corporations, for institutions, governments, basically every level of society. And to me, the fact that the governments and the central banks, especially of the United States, are saying pretty much going towards this, what are they using? They're using they're using two technologies. One, blockchain, which is born from Bitcoin, and then one, a lot of these stable coins or central bank digital currencies are built, maybe built possibly on Ethereum, right? And so basically using the technology from the top two cryptocurrencies in the space, right, to me is a government admission that this system is better than the one that they've built. Right. Which, for technology that's less than 12, 13 years old. I mean, that's pretty freaking amazing. We haven't seen this big of a shift in human history when it comes to financial technology this quickly. And it's funny that it's just coinciding here along with a big shift in human nature, including, how the United States is perceived globally.
Yeah. I want to address this comment here
Yes.
by Table BDs. It says, "Are you not absolutely petrified by CBDCs and what they mean for crypto?" And so, in my humble opinion, which is an opinion, the government's number one legacy is failure, and so people are pretty dumb. Don't get me wrong, especially with the recent global situation that happened regarding a certain thing that went and came from China, right? Can't talk about it, but read between the lines. And I think people are becoming more and more aware of like what is going on in regards to like the kind of incompetence of the government. I think, I think governments that showed peak incompetence during this time, number one, definitely governments like Canada, Australia, who won't even let their citizens leave. You know what I mean? Um, America, obviously. I mean, we have our commander in chief, and you see him fall off the bike the other day.
Of course.
Oh
I
my
was like,
god!
well, at least they didn't break a hip. I mean,
Oh man,
that's about
we
the
can only
best
be
thing.
so lucky.
Yeah,
And
exactly right.
now we have President Kamala Harris in office.
No thanks.
Yeah, man. So, anyways, but I just don't. I think that clearly this clearly this is an attempt at globalized currency, one world currency to an extent, and I think that they're going to try to do it, but it's gonna take a lot of time, and
It's a David versus Goliath battle, right? You know, um, your decentralized technologies, your normal average individuals, right? They have the chance to have a peaceful resistance. If you go back in the mid 90s and you just listen to a lot of stuff that Milton Friedman talks about, he's like, if, you know,
oh
humanity is to
lord,
ever take money back into the hands of the people, right? It can't be done through force, right? It has to be done through a peaceful resistance. And that peaceful resistance, to be honest, is cryptocurrency. It's Bitcoin.
yeah. Speaking
Yeah.
of that, hold on, I got breaking news.
All right.
Let me see if I can pull this up here. So Jerome Powell, he says, take a look here. Fed Chair Jerome Powell says the American economy is very strong.
They're going to continue talking that delusion going into the elections.
Very strong. Yikes, man. That
And
is
inflation's what at the highest it's been in our entire lifetimes, right? In the 40 years plus.
like yikes, bro. I just can't even, like, the audacity. And I just, and it makes me just feel like either they're so confident that they got this in the bag, or they're so arrogant that nothing is going to happen. What do you take away from this?
I've been seeing this from, basically different people in the United States government. You see people saying like, well, Biden especially, right, has been continuously just like speaking this mantra just to hope it's true, right? But it just doesn't make any sense. Like if you look back, you know, uh, just the last couple of years, I mean, we're in the worst situation we've been in since, the 2008, 2009 financial crash. Or you could also compare it to, the pandemic, basically the corona crash, but that was, very short lived. So, um, generally speaking, I think they're just going to, like I said, continue to talk this delusion. And yeah, I think people should be somewhat petrified of central bank digital currencies, because if you look at the difference between the United States and China, right, in terms of how they do surveillance on their own people and also on other nations, right? China's overt, doesn't care, just says, "Yep, we literally are making Skynet coin. What you going to do about it? Nothing, right?" Versus the United States says, "Oh yeah, we're going to make it equivalent to cash. Don't worry about it. It's going to be totally private, all that stuff." Meanwhile, in the background, how many back doors are they going to build into that stuff? So I think people really need to be aware of this, because they've already made this decision without, any form of quote unquote democracy, right? And one thing people should really look into if they really want to understand this is the Bank of International Settlements, which is the world's basically the world's central bank. Take a look into there, because a lot of what these governments, and organizations are doing are just they're doing this of their own volition. They don't care what the people have to say. And then the second half of the question here, what does it mean for crypto? I think it's one of those things where you're going 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So eventually freedom wins.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. I mean, people. I tweeted out this in the world on my Twitter account, and this also, let me just plus. There's a new thing that just came in as well. Uh, but I'm just blown away at what I just fucking read. Hold on, let me pull this up. The blatant hypocrisy is just insane. But I tweeted this out, and I said, like, there's a gradual and perpetual red pilling of the world, and you can't go back. You know what I mean? You're not just gonna like unred pill people. You're not gonna like so. For example, more like I get some people are get salty or whatever, but once somebody like really starts understanding Bitcoin, and you teach them about the Federal Reserve, and you teach them about what's going on with the currencies and all that stuff, they don't unsee it. You know what I mean? And when people find out they're like getting shafted, they get angry. Look at
Mm.
this. Justin, the U.S. SEC Commissioner Hester Pierce says she does not support crypto company bailouts and need to let these things play out.
And she's a very big proponent of crypto.
Yeah, but to be honest with you, that's total bullshit, because you had in 2008 they were bailing out Ford and GE. You remember that?
Everything. Yeah, they're bailing out everybody. I mean,
Ford went down to like $1.
yep.
During the coronavirus crash, they were bailing out Carnival Cruise and Delta and a lot of these airlines.
Even the Lakers got a small business loan.
So, we're just gonna we're just kind of watching them lie to us. Let me ask you guys in the chat real quick. Just a quick poll in the chat, and okay, audience poll here. You guys to vote here. Say,
This is obviously be in your chat for anybody who's
no,
wondering.
I'm just gonna put a screen poll.
Oh, you can do that on StreamYard?
Now I'm gonna do it kind of ghetto.
Gotcha.
Okay. So audience poll is going on right now. Shout out to Tap2, $20 super chat. You will own nothing and be happy. That's right. Audience poll. Do you think the USA economy is good right now? Just in the chat, put a 1, and then if you think it's no, put a 2. Because we can't really put a poll because we're running on 2 different channels, but we just want to see, because we have a master feed of the chats here behind back screen, and yeah, I'm seeing nothing but 2s.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I was
On
like,
your
there's not
end?
one.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen a single one come in yet. So we got that 2, 2, 2, 2. I mean, yeah, I don't know, man. It just seems to me that okay. So then, looking at this, right? Um, it's well. Now let me ask you this: Powell was not appointed by the Biden administration, right? I mean, he's separate, obviously.
Yeah, I mean the Fed's a private organization.
Right. So I guess you're getting pressure from the government or whatnot to potentially lie. I mean, are we wrong? Do you think we're wrong?
No, I mean, all these, follow the money is one of the biggest things, right? Money is power. Um, you know, it's one of those things that you just follow. I think people thought we were a little off our rockers, in 2020 when we were saying, yeah, they're using this crisis to divert your attention away from the financial, aspect of this QE that they've been doing since, they actually ramped up the QE in October, November. Actually, I think it was September, October of 2019, right?
Mm-hmm.
They called it repo. And if you go and you actually Google the New York Times in, I think it was October of 2019, and you just said repo is not QE, New York Times, just type that in. You'll
Mm-hmm.
literally see articles trying to convince people, oh, don't worry. We're not printing money. This is just something different. And then as soon as, they had the crisis to, basically start ramping up the QE to, levels we've never seen in the United States' history in terms of how much money they were printing, is it about the money or is it about, your well-being?
I mean, again, for you guys, just to reiterate what Charlie's saying, I'm going to play a real quick, Okay, so I'm clip from. This is me back in the day. When I say back in the day, like this is Interview with a Man, episode 225. You can find this on my channel. Just says Interview with a Man 225, top 3 red flags about coronavirus. This is on March 17, 2020. Like I said, from the get-go, me and Charlie, we just knew what was going on. This is when President Trump was in office, and I just want to play it real quick for you guys. Just listen, like literally. So here's a context, right? So apparently there's a gigantic global pandemic. People are dying in the streets of China, Italy. People are all over the ICU. Remember the viral footage from Italy?
Apparently, bodies piling up on the streets.
Bodies piling up in the streets. And listen to what the president has to say. Listen to the first thing he has to say. I'm covering my ass by saying, okay, and I am not. See what they're going to says about.
I think we have some great things to talk about. I'll start by discussing the Federal Reserve. As you know, it just happened minutes ago, but to me, it makes me very happy. And I want to congratulate the Federal Reserve. For starters, they've lowered the Fed rate from what it was, which was 1 to 1.25, and it's been lowered down to 0 to 0.25 or 0.25. So it's 0 to 0.25. That's a big difference. It's quite a bit, about a point. And in addition, very importantly, the Federal Reserve is going to be purchasing $500 billion of treasuries and $200 billion of mortgage-backed securities, and that number can increase.
Mortgage-backed securities, that's a solid investment.
But they're going to start with that, and that's really good news. It's really great for our country. It's something that we're very happy. I have to say this. I'm very happy.
Let's be honest. So the first thing he does as soon as the press conference is called, he starts thanking the Federal Reserve. For me, as soon as I saw that, I was just like, is everybody in the world a complete fucking moron? And the answer is yes. But massive red flag there. And then you were tracking what was going on with Deutsche Bank, and we saw what was going on, and we were just like, yo, this is not about a virus. It's
bigger.
This is all about the money. And the thing is this, so Charlie, they got to turn these money printers on again soon.
Yeah,
right?
They can't. I mean, unless they want us to just, literally collapse the economy. I mean, it's what do you call it? It's a house of cards if you look at it, right? And it's been like that since 2008, 2009. And if you go and look in the code base for the first block on Bitcoin's blockchain, right, it basically said it's just a response to them bailing out the banks, right? Because they had a chance in 2008, 2009 to literally, press the reset. Yeah. Actually, I think Iceland was the only country that actually prosecuted its banks.
Yeah.
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 Which they literally were criminals. And but I mean, think about these politicians, right? Nancy Pelosi, the best trader of all time. They're not getting paid for their work, right? They're quote unquote civil servants, right? So they're going to find other ways to manipulate the system for their own benefit. And I know people are like, well, that's conspiracy, blah, 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 blah. I mean, if you can't start looking at it in that way, I think you're, just listening to the Kool-Aid that the media puts out there on a daily basis, right? So you do have to look for alternative sources to think critically. And I think when you do think critically, you actually start opening up people's eyes and stuff like that. But they don't want you to think critically, right? It's that whole thing. 1984 is just like, shut up, don't think, and just follow what we say. And that's what they want.
It's just I don't. Yeah, I just can't. I'm trying to anticipate what's going to happen next, but because like the reality is, uh, you know, the situation with the global economy is is it just can't. You can't stop printing the money. Like you cannot. So like really, if I were to get really like full blown, like you know, there's two options. Either you let everything collapse, or you eliminate the opposition.
Yep. I
The
mean,
opposition is not the government. The opposition is the people listening to my voice, not you, FBI. But but yeah.
well, and once we get into the Ray Dalio video and stuff like that, when you go through these phases within, within empires, I guess you could say that's one way to describe it. We're in that phase where we're going into the kicking and screaming phase, right? Aaron Clary's "Enjoy the Decline," and when they can't fix the debt problem from a government perspective, what's one of the best ways to fix that? Money printing and war, right? Money printing for war. So, things can get intense here over the next couple of years, and we're already starting to see percolations of that.
Yeah, and we're gonna cover that in details. So, is there just okay? So here's the deal, audience. We are gonna play directly from Ray Dalio's website, his YouTube channel. We don't necessarily know if we're gonna get copyright stricken or strucken down. We're gonna just ride it out until it happens. If the stream fails, is there a live stream of Jerome Powell speaking right now? Do you know if that we can find?
I could try to pull it up. Yeah.
Chat if you can know if there is, just give us a yes or no. But in the meantime, we're gonna get going, and we're gonna both pause and make points throughout this. The actual video itself is 43 minutes long. There's a lot of confusing business terms and jargon in this thing, and so when either Charlie or I believe that we can make a point on something here, we're gonna pause it and kind of elaborate on what is happening. But in the meantime,
yeah, I found a link with him talking right now.
Okay, perfect. That'll be the backup show. We can change the title when need be.
Yep.
Yeah, and then this is another thing. So God, people are. I think it's. I probably just need to stop saying it because I've lost all faith in humanity. But yeah, this right here, hence all the foreign aid to Ukraine. Right? You gotta send that printed money somewhere. And that's like, not to get political, but Ukraine's like the dirty mattress money for a certain political party, and 10% for the big guy.
Well, yeah, and which companies benefit the most from that? You got your Lockheed Martins, and those types. They always benefit from these types of crises.
Mm-hmm. So let's take a look here at Ray Dalio's principles for dealing with the changing world order. Here we go.
The changing world order.
And guys, let us know how the audio is and whatnot. If it's too loud, too low, whatever, let us know, please.
The times ahead will be radically different from those that we've experienced in our lifetimes, though similar to many times before. How do I know that? Because they always have been.
Oh, real quick, one more thing I want to just say before we get going. The thing is, when we are doing this for you here live, the main reason is because we do want to add like a sober voice of reason to you guys out there, because I think a lot of people are going hyper doom and gloom, but we're just in a transitionary phase right now. And we want to let you know, like, we just happen to be at the tail end, especially in America. We're at the tail end of the American glory phase, American dynasty phase. Charlie, you there?
Okay. Yeah. And this,
I thought you're frozen.
I'm just listening to you, right? But like, dialed in, baby. But
You're killing it. You're doing a great job.
no, I was I was just thinking like the sound of this is the only thing that, like, the music might be the only thing that hits us on the copyright. So, but generally, I mean, this content should be fair use, right?
Yep. And then, guys, by the way, please just smash the like button so we can, because the thing is, the more people that are educated on what's happening and the more people that know basically like the fiat currency system is total scam, the more people that can help us make the change that we all need. So hit that smash that like button. Share this video to your friends, family, your loved ones. Get it out there. We're trying to be as PG as possible, because we feel like this message is super important. And so here we go.
Over my roughly 50 years of global macroeconomic investing, I've learned the hard way that the most important events that surprised me did so because they never happened in my lifetime. These painful surprises led me to study the last 500 years of history for similar situations, where I saw that they had indeed happened many times before, with the ups and the downs of the Dutch, British, and US empires. And every time they did, it was a sign of the changing world order. This study taught me valuable lessons that I'm going to pass along to you here in a distilled form. You can find the comprehensive version in my book, Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order. Let me begin with a story that brought me to this point, about how I learned to anticipate the future by studying the past. In 1971, when I was a young clerk on the floor.
Yes.
Just one thing I'll mention there. I do think that point right there that Ray is making, right? Understanding the future by looking at the past is quite important. We recommend the book in the Crypto Mindset course, The Reminiscences of a Stock Operator. Is a book about the stock market when there was still ticker tape over 100 years ago, and stuff like that. So I do think it is important for people to look at financial history once they have kind of a grasp of what's going on currently. So, anyways, we'll keep going.
Yeah, and give me 2 seconds. I'm going to turn off the alerts on the super chats, so there's not really making a lot of noise for us. Somebody says, John, have you MLD? Forget unrelated, but have you sold your car bag? No, I look at that and I cry every day. Let's continue.
Of the New York Stock Exchange, the United States ran out of money and defaulted on its debts. That's right, the U.S. ran out of money. How? Well, back then, gold was the money used in transactions between countries. Paper money, like the dollar, was like checks in a checkbook in that it had no value other than it could be exchanged for gold, which was the real money. At the time, the United States was spending a lot more money than it was earning by writing a lot more of these paper money checks than it had gold in the bank to exchange for them. As people turned these checks into the bank for gold money, the amount of gold in the U.S. started to dwindle. It soon became obvious that the U.S. couldn't keep its promises for all the existing paper money, so people holding dollars rushed to exchange them before the gold ran out. Recognizing that the U.S. was going to run out of real money, on Sunday evening, August 15th, President Nixon went on television to tell the world that the U.S. was breaking its promise to let people exchange their dollars for gold. Of course, he didn't say it that way. He said it more diplomatically, without making it clear that the United States was defaulting.
The strength of a nation's currency is based on the strength of that nation's economy. And the American economy is by far the strongest in the world. Accordingly, I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to take the action necessary to defend the dollar against the speculators. I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States.
I watched in awe, realizing that money as we understood it was ending.
And what they're basically talking about here is they were taking the United States dollar off of the gold standard and officially
temporarily.
Yeah, temporarily, right? Yeah. Also, 15 days to slow the curve. Right? 15 days to flatten the curve. We're still flattening over here in Japan, baby. But yeah, temporarily, and that's what officially made it a fiat currency. Correct? It was not technically a fiat currency before, right?
Well, I mean, you could actually get gold for it if you wanted to. So, gold was the real money.
And so, let me ask you this, Charlie. So, how were they? Why were they? Do you know? Because I don't really know, and I'm going to do more research on this on the 28th when I'm meeting two experts here in Tokyo. But why, like, why was the government? I mean, obviously it's the government, but why were they spending more than they had? Why were they running a deficit? What was going on?
I think the only time the United States has actually been in a surplus on a national level was when Andrew Jackson was president, and he was very much against central banks, which is quite interesting. But every facet of our government since then has always basically been working at a deficit, and it's kind of like an addiction, right? It's easier to print. And it's easier to, keep borrowing, use that debt in order to do what you want, right? Think about, housing prices over time, right? People, especially if you're looking at the boomers, right? They actually bought a house, it would appreciate in value against the dollar, but the dollar is obviously losing value over time. Like if you look at the dollar's, purchasing power 100 years ago versus now, or even into the 70s when this was happening, it's always declining. So people are basically conditioned to think that debt is good, right? It's the Keynesian economics, which, to be honest, like it's hilarious. If you look at the universities in the United States, Keynesian economics always says debt is good, inflation's good. Keep basically borrowing. And if you look at how businesses were run, especially through the boomer generation, that's how businesses worked, right? And I think our generation actually is like, well, let's have the novel idea of actually working to not be in debt, but the system is just a debt-based system, and it's truly not a free market. And that worked for a while, right? I mean, taking the United States off the gold standard allows basically the military to, buy the best materials very, very cheap. And then every year it's just cheaper and cheaper and cheaper for them to buy, the best technology, right? And to build the best technology. So it worked for a while, but it's going to break, right? You can't keep doing that forever. So I think one thing that people should really look into if they want to understand more towards free markets, which is more of like a libertarian idea, basically go and take a look at it's either Mises or Mises.org, MISE.org. Right. And this is Austrian economics. So this is the idea of instead of bailing out the banks, you should actually let them fail, right? Because they can't actually run a good balance sheet. So yeah, if you just look at the government, they're addicted to dollars, they're addicted to free money, they're addicted to cheap purchasing power. And yeah, once the music stops, then it's the future generations that pay that toll essentially. And what do you call it? That over the next 20, 30 years, right? We're just kind of kicking the can down the road, just by more and more money printing. But all the different things they're doing between 2019 and now by doing quantitative easing at a ridiculous level and then doing quantitative tightening, a bit, and then going back towards quantitative easing here at some point, that whole kind of circus or that dance is meant to kind of keep the house of cards propped up essentially. So yeah, that's it's a debt-based economy essentially.
So then essentially now to make it simple, based upon what you've just said. Is it just basically human incompetence, like gross human incompetence,
It's
like
short-term thinking.
spending more? I mean, because they got in trouble because they they're just spending more than they
Well,
can actually had in the bank. The
right, but
gold line.
it made that generation extremely, quote unquote, rich. Right, there was a surplus. It felt like they could, there was a lot, everybody could afford a house. Everybody could, do this, do that. Right, the '90s was kind of the peak of that surplus feeling. But yeah, you got to pay that debt back eventually, and they don't want to. And by the time, I mean, that's what a lot of the military industrial complex is about. It's avoiding actual payment of that debt through force.
Yeah, and that's exactly kind of where America basically said, "All right, we're fiat, and we have the largest military in the world." The largest threat to us at that time in the '70s was probably Russia, right? It wasn't China. They were still all fucked
Correct.
up. We had just decimated Japan in the war, and they became an ally.
Yeah, and
And that,
they became one of the best. They had one of the best economies in the world going into the '80s, and then basically, if you watch the documentary, what was that called, Princes of the Yen by Richard Werner, I recommend people go take a watch on that. It's a free documentary here on YouTube. Essentially, what's happening on a global scale was happening just in Japan back going from the late '80s going into the '90s. Basically, you had Japan, coming through the '80s extremely strong, and they were like, well, we want to be part of the world, basically the world order. We want to be part of the Bank of International Settlements. What do we have to do in order to, join you guys? And I'll basically always be part of the global elite. They're like, well, sell off a bunch of your land to foreign entities. So they did. And then devalue your currency and put yourself into a recession for a significant period of time. And then during that time as well, they also took out their checks and balances in their financial system. So they basically just kind of shot themselves in the foot a bit in order to, be initiated into the global club. Right. And so, yeah, it is kind of interesting to see the different countries, how they, work together to make these things viable.
yeah, man, it's it's crazy just to. What's even crazier is people have faith in the systems.
Yep.
You know,
Well, elections are fair and all
they
that
are.
stuff. Yeah, I mean,
They are 100%. And they are legitimate here on YouTube.
Yep.
Let's
And free
continue.
speech still exists here on YouTube, right?
Yes, totally.
What a crisis. I expected the stock market to plunge the next day, so I got on the exchange floor early to prepare. When the opening bell rang, pandemonium broke out, but not the kind I expected. The market was up, way up, and went on to rise nearly 25%. That surprised me because I never experienced a currency devaluation before. When I dug into history, I discovered that the exact same thing happened in 1933 and had the exact same effect. Then paper dollars were also linked to gold, which the US was running out of because it was spending more paper money checks than it had gold to exchange for them. And
Then again, human incompetence. I mean, every dipshit in the world knows how to not spend more than what they have, except for governments, it seems.
Yeah, and part of that incompetence is kind of going back to the one point I was kind of making a little bit earlier, which is that incompetence or that short-term thinking. Most of the people who are making the decisions, they're thinking, well, it's good for me during my lifetime, but by the time anybody has to actually think about this stuff, I'll be dead. So who gives a fuck, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's pretty much the logic.
And Muhammad says, "Hey, John and Charlie, is this why they don't teach about money so that people are competent?" Yeah, and this is why they have drag queen story time, but they don't teach about economics, balancing your checkbook, how to file taxes properly, tax strategies. entrepreneurship, how to balance your calories, what's a carb, what's a protein, what's a fat, how many grams are in how many of what, you know what I mean? And so, I mean, the government is incompetent in pretty much everything. Why do you think they would be competent in educating their masses?
It's not for their benefit.
Here we go.
And President Roosevelt announced on the radio that he would break the country's promise to exchange dollars for gold.
It was then that I issued the proclamation providing for the National Bank holiday. And this was the first step in the government's reconstruction of our financial and economic fabric. The second step, last Thursday, was the legislation promptly and patriotically passed by the Congress, confirming my proclamation and broadening my powers so that it became possible, in view of the requirement of time, to extend the holiday and lift the ban of that holiday gradually in the days to come. This law also gave authority to develop a program of facilitation.
In both cases, breaking the link to gold allowed the U.S. to continue spending more than it earned, simply by printing more paper dollars. Since there was an increase in the number of dollars without an increase in the country's wealth, the value of each dollar fell. As these new dollars entered the market, without a corresponding increase in productivity, they went to buy lots of stocks, gold, and commodities, and hence caused their prices to rise. As I studied more history, I saw that the exact same thing happened many, many times before. I saw that since the beginning of time, when governments spent much more than they took in taxes, and conditions got bad, they ran out of money and they needed more. So they printed more, a lot more, which made its value fall and made the prices of most everything, including stocks, gold, and commodities, rise.
Sound familiar?
We're all rich on
Sound
paper.
familiar, guys? Who's out there paying $9 a gallon yet?
7-Eleven, I think, has $7 and $11 gas these days.
You know what that means. Assets are inflating massively. More printing, more dollar. It's all fake. It's all fugazi. It's all scam. That's why, cash is king, and that's all great and all. But the reality is, you want to make sure. I mean, in my opinion, cash flow is the real king.
Yes.
Because it's adjustable based upon inflation.
There's a really interesting story just from my family in particular. There was one of our relatives, I can't remember how long ago exactly, but it's probably like before 1930, right?
Mm-hmm.
They had,
good work, soldier,
taken some of their savings in dollars, rolled it up into, like basically rolls, put rubber bands around them, put it in a tin can, and they literally were putting, dollars under their mattress or, wherever they stored it in their house, right?
Oh, yeah.
Back, I can't remember if it was like 80s or 90s, but my dad basically took that, like if you tried to open it up, like the dollars were pretty brittle. So you could take it to the bank and they would like lay it out. They'd actually see what dollars, and they'd give you the dollar value at that time worth, but essentially, and that's over what, like probably about 50, 60, 70 years, something like that. And if they had simply just held gold, right, instead of dollars under their bed, essentially, they would have retained their purchasing power in value much, much better than the dollars, because that amount of money, that they were saving essentially back in, the early 1900s could buy them something significant like a car, right? But if you tried when you brought it into, the 80s, 90s, essentially, it bought you, like a month's rent, something like that, right? So just the ridiculousness of the devaluation of the dollar, over generations, it's stealing, right? Essentially, the government is stealing from you. So that's why, in the short term, yes, cash is king, but you do have as the dollar devalues faster and faster and faster, it forces people into more speculation because that's the only thing they can do to outpace it.
Yeah, and I think things like I know he's a little bit of a wacky guy, but Gonzalo Lira, who runs Coach Red Pill channel, he's over in Ukraine watching everything. And a couple months ago, he was saying that he believes that down the road, the Russian ruble will be the global reserve currency. Now, I'm not entirely sure about that, but the ruble did. I'm not agreeing with him, but the ruble did just hit at all-time high versus the dollar a couple days ago, and that's because they're basically two things have happened recently. So the reason for the United States currency being the reserve currency is because you have to use dollars to buy oil. Two things have happened recently. So Russia is now doing the same thing with natural gas to other European countries. I believe Germany has already capitulated and said, okay, like we'll pay in ruble. Like typically they just want to pay in their own country, in their own country's currency, but now they have to pay in ruble. And I believe a couple other countries have uh, have caved in as well. And then the Chinese have recently paid I think it was Saudi Arabia, correct, Charlie? They paid Saudi Arabia in Chinese yuan for oil, which is the first time that's ever happened. So the Saudis took yuan, Chinese yuan, which is the currency of China, for oil. And typically on a global scale, you're gonna have to use dollars to do that. So we're starting to see, in my opinion, I'm interpreting these as cracks in the armor of the United States dollar being the global reserve currency. In addition to that, the video is going to show far more detail what's really happening.
Last thing I'll say here before we restart it. That's why gold was, such a good way to back assets in dollars. Essentially, was it's trustless, right? This society values it. This society values it relatively similarly, but in the digital age, which we're in currently, right? We have a digital version of gold, which is Bitcoin, which is also a trustless way for countries to work between each other. So, going forward, what would you rather do as a country? Would you rather send like an actual plane full of gold to another country, or would you rather pay in Bitcoin? Now, as large nations, right, they're not going to be doing this, but we're starting to see with smaller nations like El Salvador, right, they're starting to kind of get this. And whenever they start using Bitcoin in that way, right, organizations like the IMF start flipping out because essentially takes the control, which also then just takes their power away, right? Brings the power back to the smaller players. Whereas in the current world order that we have, in terms of economics, right, we're used to a few players at the top basically making all the rules. And we're starting to see that shift in what we have here with crypto.
All right, let's go back to this. So the more money they print, the more dollars you have, and the price of assets artificially go up, which is what's happening right now.
That's when I first learned the principle that when central banks print a lot of money to relieve a crisis, buy stocks, gold, and commodities because they're...
Would you consider Bitcoin a commodity?
It depends on how people look at it, but some people look at it as a security. Some people look at it as a commodity. I would say
stocks, gold, commodities. Where do you think Bitcoin falls under?
Somewhere between gold and commodities.
Right.
Yeah.
Their value will rise and the value of paper money will fall. This printing of money is also what happened in 2008 to relieve the mortgage-driven debt crisis, and in 2020 to relieve the pandemic-driven economic crisis, and it almost certainly will happen in the future. So I suggest that you keep this principle in mind. These experiences...
Sorry, I was going to say this. For you guys, there, you might want to take, if you're watching on mobile, take a screenshot of that for a little bit of notes later, and really drill this into your mind, because this is like when Charlie and I were predicting, like, okay, they're printing money, the halving's coming up in 2020, we're going to see at least 14K Bitcoin, but we did not expect to see 40K, which we saw, and later that the following year, and then 60 and everything. Like we were expecting, like, okay, and at that time when we were talking about Bitcoin was 5K, And we were like, yeah, 3x, yo, 5K Bitcoin to 14, like we're all rich, yeah. And then we're like, what the fuck? Like, hold on.
Yeah, once we broke 11K Bitcoin, because it took us a while to break 10K. Once we broke past 11K, I was expecting 27K Bitcoin, right? Was the first target. And I was expecting that to happen over like 6 to 8, 9 months. I think it literally happened going from 11 to there probably in about like 5 months. Like it just happened. It just went boom, extremely quick.
Yeah. Okay, let's continue.
You keep this principle in mind. These experiences gave me another principle, which is to understand what is coming at you, you need to understand what happened before you. That principle led me to study how the Roaring Twenties bubble turned into the 1930s depression, which gave me the lessons that allowed me to anticipate and profit from the 2007 bubble turning into the 2008 bust. All these experiences led me to develop an almost instinctual urge to look to the past for similar situations to learn how to handle the future well. Changing orders. Over the last few years, 3 big things that hadn't happened in my lifetime prompted me to do this study. First, countries didn't have enough money to pay their debts, even after lowering interest rates to 0. So their central banks began printing lots of money to do so. Second, big internal conflicts emerged due to growing gaps in wealth and values. This showed up in political populism and polarization between the left, who want to redistribute wealth, and the right, who want to defend those holding the wealth. And third, increasing external conflict between a rising great power and the leading great power.
I've been talking about the whole China pill series on this channel for how long?
Yeah, dude, that's I think it's a super important series. Weren't like some of the videos from that taken down as well?
Of course they were.
Yeah, of course, right. But no, I think understanding that is extremely important.
We're over here in Asia, and you really have to understand the Chinese mindset. Like the Chinese, I can't even talk about some things because let's just say we have access to high level members in the military, and China's everywhere. And they have one thing and one thing only on their mind: destroying America and taking dominance of the world. And they have it all outlined, and they are organized. Yeah, they're not perfect, but if you look like people, the number one worst thing you could do is underestimate your enemy. And I'm not saying that China's going to absolutely be the next global world power, but if you just take a look at what's happening in America, we are not keeping our top spot at all. And
definitely not.
This video we'll elaborate on that as we continue. But if you're interested, on this channel, Modern Life Dating, look, they have a series called The China Pill, and it's a multiple part series where I just go into depth on what's happening with China. And the biggest thing is this: China is just producing so much. America, we don't make anything in America. There's almost nothing made in America. Everything is made externally, and a large percentage of all of our goods are coming out of China. And a country's production, their output is a big factor into their strength in the global economy. And you think China is only producing for us, dude? There's a lot of stuff here in Japan that is made in China. Japanese are buying cheap goods too. I mean, Australia is basically owned by China.
Yeah, it's pretty scary actually. Like, how much they control Australia. But one I mean, so far in Chinese history, I mean, China has a history of trying to basically take all of Asia, right? That's been their goal forever. And the other thing that they've had in their history is authoritarianism, right? Essentially, their citizens, are, I'm not saying like all of them or anything like that, but, especially in the modern area, but generally throughout history, they've been told what to do by their government and they've accepted it for the most part, right? And so it's one of these things where it's like they have an authoritarian government that's always been trying to expand. And so far, geographically, it's been limited in that sense. But yeah, going forward, with the digital age and everything like that, right, they're trying to expand in other ways, especially through information and espionage.
Yep. And China is like consistently hacking the United States. I believe
Yep.
TikTok is a psyop from China because a lot of people don't know that there's a separate TikTok that is for Chinese people only. It's called Douyin, Douyin. And the stuff they perpetuate on Douyin is like engineers doing good stuff, scientists, mathematics, like stuff that is great. And in America, you see like the fucking the fucking Morlocks of society, the freaks of society on there, and they're getting pushed up in the algorithm. And if you talk the truth, or you like for example the Fresh and Fit podcast, when they like drop legitimate truths about what's going on between men and women, how there's imbalance between the genders and all that stuff, their accounts get deleted, and it's like, I don't know. Let's just continue. Let's just continue because this makes a lot of sense here.
As is now happening with China and the United States. So I looked back. I saw that all these had happened together before, many times, and nearly always led to changing domestic and world orders. The last time this sequence happened was from 1930 to 1945. What exactly is an order, you might ask? It's a governing system for people dealing with each other. There are internal orders for governing within countries, typically laid out in constitutions. And there is a world order for governing between countries, typically laid out in treaties. Internal orders change at different times than world orders, though whether within or between countries, these orders typically change after wars. Civil wars within countries, international wars between countries. They happen when revolutionary new forces defeat weak old orders. For example, the U.S. internal order was laid out in the Constitution in 1789 after the American Revolution, and it is still operating today, even after the American Civil War. Russia got rid of its old order and established a new one with the Russian Revolution in 1917, which ended in 1991 with a relatively bloodless revolution. China began its current internal order in 1949 when the Chinese Communist Party won the Civil War. You get the idea. The current world order, commonly called the American World Order, formed after the Allied victory in World War II, when the U.S. emerged as the dominant world power. It was set out in agreements and treaties for how global governance and monetary systems work. In 1944, the New World Monetary System was laid out in the Bretton Woods Agreement and established the dollar as the world's leading reserve currency. A reserve currency is a currency that is commonly accepted around the world, and having one is a key factor in a country becoming the richest and most powerful empire. With a new dominant power and monetary system established, a new world order begins. These changes take place in a timeless and universal cycle that I call the Big Cycle. I'll start with a quick overview, then give you a more complete version, and then direct you to my book if you want more. As I studied the 10 most powerful...
I was going to show you guys the book if you want to get a hold of it.
My book if you want more.
Ray Dalio, don't strike this video down. We're promoting your book, Principles of Changing the World Order, Why Nations Succeed and Fail. Ray Dalio. Definitely recommend it.
As I studied the 10 most powerful empires over the last 500 years and the last 3 reserve currencies, it took me through the rise and decline of the Dutch Empire and the guilder, the British Empire and the pound, the rise and early decline in the United States Empire and the dollar, and the decline and rise of the Chinese Empire and its currencies, as well as the rise and decline of the Spanish, German, French, Indian, Japanese, Russian, and Ottoman empires, along with their significant conflicts, as measured in this chart. To understand China's patterns better, I also studied the rise and fall of Chinese dynasties and their monies back to the year 600. Because looking at all these measures at once can be confusing, I'll focus on the 4 most important ones: the Dutch, British, US, and Chinese. You'll quickly notice the pattern. Now let's simplify the form a bit. As you can see, they transpired in overlapping cycles that lasted about 250 years, with 10 to 20-year transition periods between them. Typically, these transitions have been periods of great conflict because leading powers don't decline without a fight. So how am I measuring an empire's power? In this study, I used 8 metrics. Each country's measure of total power is derived by averaging them together. They are education, inventiveness and technology development, competitiveness in global markets, economic output, share of world trade, military strength, the power of their financial center for capital markets, and the strength of their currency as a reserve currency.
So those are the 8 factors right there: education, trade, innovation and technology, military, competitiveness, financial center, output, and reserve status. I kind of want to just put a fork in this because I hear people saying this all the time. I've been hearing people say this about Japan, China. You could even say this about Germany. Ben Rickert says, "Here's another truth Ray will never tell you. China has terrible demographics. Demographics lead economies, and economics lead politics. The USA is a very young nation compared to China. Yes, young, fat, and stupid." Okay. And now you can see here the 8 strength. Nothing does the same here about demographics. I don't know where you're citing that information from, but you're clearly misinformed. Go ahead, Charlie.
Well, one of the things as well, like when you're looking at the dynasties of Chinese history, they have a lot of those, cycles, right? Whereas the United States is basically finishing up its first cycle.
Yep.
Right. About 250 years or so. Doesn't mean the United States can't come back in the future, right? And also have another, essentially dynasty, right? But these things play out over, centuries, essentially, right? Decades, centuries. So, we're just kind of at a certain point here. But I think one thing that, he, makes a point here on a different thing is, there's a lot of people, pandering to the Chinese money, right? Like the NBA. And so, yeah, we have to watch the whole video to discuss this properly. So I don't think he's saying that it's inevitable that China is the world superpower. By no means. I don't think, the Chinese yuan will be a world reserve currency by any means. But in terms of the United States peak strength, it's already passed.
Yeah, and so a lot of people are here saying, here again, Chinese population is more aged and not producing as many children. There's more genius level people in China than there are in all of America. Okay, I think people kind of underestimate the sheer volume of how many people are in China. And in addition to that, once a country's birth rate goes below 2.0, it's game over. So Japan, game over. Korea, game over. USA, game over. Germany, game over. China, game over. But this is happening. This is a global phenomenon. I think the only country that has like high level birth rates are nations in Africa. And so yeah, like countries never recover from this. So this is not just a China only problem. This is a problem in America. The only people in America having babies are Latino people. If you look at the demographics, if you really want to talk about who's going to do that, but still as a nation in America, it's on the decline. So we're not saying that the reserve currency is going to be China. What we're documenting is that the strength of the dollar is irrefutably collapsing, and the strength of the yuan is irrefutably rising. And when we talk about what China on my series, The China Pill, a lot of people seem to miss the fact that China is aggressively moving into northern Africa. And they're coming in with like medicine and stuff, like, oh, we're humanitarian China. And they're also putting like a lot of these countries, I believe Sri Lanka and some northern African countries, in like infrastructure deals that are basically like impossible to pay off. And they're going to like use the natural resources. They're after a lot of I believe they're after a lot of lithium to obviously make batteries and whatnot, because Africa is still like rich with resources, and Africa is huge. I don't think a lot of people realize how massive the continent of Africa is. Like, you look at the map, like, oh, it's kind of comparably same to the America. No, Africa is massive. You can fit all of America into Africa and have plenty more room. And they're out there, I mean, Africa, no offense, like this is just history, but Africa for literally centuries has been pillaged by the earth for its resources.
Yeah, essentially what China's doing is a different version of colonialism.
Absolutely. Diamonds, gold, natural resources. It's nonstop. So it's just China's turn.
Because these powers are measurable, we can see how strong each country is now, was in the past, and whether they're rising or declining. By examining the sequences from many countries, we can see how a typical cycle transpires. And because the wiggles can be confusing, we can simplify it a bit to focus on the pattern of cause-effect relationships that drive the rise and decline of a typical empire. As you can see, better education typically leads to increased innovation and technology development, and with a lag, the establishment of the currency as a reserve currency. You can also see that these forces then declined in a similar order, reinforcing each other's decline. Let's now look at the typical sequence of events going on inside a country that produces these rises and declines. In a nutshell, the big cycle typically begins after a major conflict, often a war, establishes the new leading power and the new world order. Because no one wants to challenge this power, a period of peace and prosperity typically follows. As people get used to this peace and prosperity, they increasingly bet on it continuing. They borrow money to do that, which eventually leads to a financial bubble. The empire's share of trade grows, and when most transactions are conducted in its currency, it becomes a reserve currency, which leads to even more borrowing. At the same time, this increased prosperity distributes wealth unevenly, so the wealth gap typically grows between the rich haves and the poor have-nots. Eventually, the financial bubble bursts, which leads to the printing of money and increased internal conflict between the rich and the poor, which leads to some form of revolution to redistribute wealth. This can happen peacefully or as a civil war. While the empire struggles with this internal conflict, its power diminishes relative to external rival powers on the rise.
And I think that's pretty relevant to what's happening in the United States right now. And I think it really is fueled by social media, because you have these psychopaths that are so like just brainwashed. Like when Donald Trump was in office, like the media, you couldn't get anywhere with any kind of social media, movies, dramas. Like everybody's just like, fuck Trump, fuck Trump, fuck Trump. People say Trump divided the nation. No, it was like the media.
Oh, for sure.
Like, the media blatantly attacking this man with tons of baseless accusations. Like I love him or hate him, whatever the case may be, I don't care. But I mean,
if they were to do that to Biden right now, which obviously they wouldn't, because the media is obviously run by a lot of those people. So many people, you say this, the slightest, criticism, and people are up in arms, right? So it's like, why is one side, overly criticized than another? And like, I'm pretty much in the middle ground, but it's one of those things where it's like, it is absolutely ridiculous, right?
Oh yeah, and you haven't been back in America, buddy. You're gonna come back. You're gonna kiss this ground when you get back to this Japanese soil. Man, you're gonna have up. You're gonna need to go to therapy when you come back. But the thing is, yeah, and this is like me going super kind of conspiracy theorist, but I believe that, like, in my opinion, someone has infiltrated the United States education system and filled it with like this Marxist education, this socialist education. And the reason stuff like this is like, okay, here's the thing, like Harry Zico says, we're arguing about A7 gender types, right? So when you have them introducing things like, okay, here are the multiple genders, right? They're now like, you cannot say there's two genders, right? There's 87 genders, okay, and now, or however many, and then in addition to that, now you have, these are my pronouns. Don't say this. This is my pronouns. All that is, it's just causing more division, more conflict, more tribalism. Divide and conquer. That's all it is. And when we're in here fighting in against ourselves, China is out there. I mean, China is like ripping up red coral outside of the Japanese Sea. They are just on a free for all out there. And nobody knows about it because they're upset about Will Smith slapping Chris Rock. You know what I mean?
Well, and one way to, fight another nation is through information, right? It's like they see this weakness in America, and it's like, well, why don't we promote that weakness? So I think your idea with TikTok being part of that social media, just being like,
Yes.
let's have these I mean, to be honest, like, without mincing words, let's have these fools just basically just outfool each other into, decay,
Yep.
right?
And this guy Ben Ricker saying China's pushing that gender pronoun nonsense. Wake up, buddy. I just literally said that, Um you should watch my content. I know you're watching on Charlie's channel, but you should come watch my content. I've been talking about this since the whole beginning of the coronavirus pandemic, because who controls the who? China. They're getting funded by the World Health Organization. I'm not going to
Yeah, you
go
can't
down
even
on.
say the word Taiwan without, there was that one guy, I forget what it was, like a year or so ago, right? He accidentally said the word Taiwan, and then he had to go on like an apology tour to China.
Oh, are you talking about John Cena?
No. Well, that too, but like there was some guy it was from either the WHO or the IMF, right? I think it was from the WHO, and he was on a call, and I think he
Acknowledge
said,
China or Taiwan as a country.
Exactly, and then China was like, you better roll that back, buddy."
I I always wanted to go to Taiwan. That was like 2013, 2014. Sorry, never in my
I
lifetime.
Dude, I went in 2013. Taiwan's a great place.
Oh, I don't doubt it.
Taipei is a really nice, really nice. And I'm just like, man, you know, not if, but when it gets taken over, I feel really bad for, I met a lot of great people there. And they're very American in the sense that, you know, they're so happy that they can basically throw up the middle finger to China, right? And like,
For
just
now.
the amount of freedom there is
Yep.
is pretty big. But like in China, like there's this building in central Taipei, that's basically, it's like this old, it's kind of a colonial-esque building, but it's like where one of their, like, kind of the center of their government. In China, they literally built a replica of this, and they've been doing military drills within it. And then they create these, kind of fantastic scenes where then they throw this into the media for their citizens, showing them basically storming that, right? And it's like, so I mean, they're not they're showing what their objectives are very, very clearly, and it's going to happen.
I mean, knowing my luck, I'll show up in Taiwan. I'll go to the beach and like a tank will come out of the water. Oh man. All right, let's go.
When a new rising power gets strong enough to compete with the dominant power that is having domestic breakdowns, external conflicts, most typically wars, take place. Out of these internal and external wars come new winners and losers. Then the winners get together to create the new world order, and the cycle begins again. As I looked back, I saw that these cause and effect relationships drove the cycles of rises and declines all the way back to the Roman Empire. I saw how the stories of each one of these cycles blended together with others before, during, and after, in the same way as each individual story blends with others to make the epic 500-year story that is our collective history. And like human life cycles, no two are exactly the same, but most are similar. They're driven by logical cause and effect relationships that progress through stages from birth to strength and maturity to weakness and inevitably decline. However, that's like saying a person's life cycle takes 80 years on average, without recognizing that many are much shorter and many are longer. While age can be a good indicator of future longevity, a better way is to look at health indicators. One can do that with empires and their vital signs too. I found that by watching the indicators of power change, I was able to see what stage a country was in, which helped me to anticipate what was likely to come next. Now, I'll take you through the big cycle in more detail. Give me 20 minutes and I'll give you the last 500 years of history and show you the similar patterns across the Dutch, British, US, and Chinese empires. 500 years of big cycles. I'm going to describe the typical cycle by dividing it into 3 phases: the rise, the top, and the decline. The rise. Successful new orders that rise, both internal and external, are typically started by powerful revolutionary leaders doing 4 things. First, they win power by gaining more support than the opposition. Second, they consolidate power by converting, weakening, or eliminating the opposition so they don't stand in their way. Third, they establish systems and institutions that make the country work well. And fourth, they pick their successors well, or create systems that do that. Because a great empire requires many great leaders over several generations. At this stage, soon after winning the fight, there's
Pause that for a
typically a
second.
period of peace and growing.
Yes.
Think about how hard that is to pull off, right? Over multiple lifetimes, having great leaders, in order to make that rise. I mean, we've seen, if you just look at the, presidents of the United States history, right? Like, how many of them would you consider great, right?
Little J. Trump.
I mean, there's just like to make that whole thing go, right? It's extremely difficult, right? And yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, what a motley crew we've had the last fucking 5 let's see, we had Clinton, right? Fucking having sex in the White House, getting national scandal. Then we have George W., which,
Basically just throwing
basically
bombs.
just basically Dick Cheney's a puppet.
Yep.
And then you had Obama, and the only reason people voted for Obama was because he was black. Straight up, that's it. If Obama's same policies were a white guy, they wouldn't have voted for him. They
I
voted.
mean, he was also the one thing you got to give him is he was a very good orator as well.
Sure.
Good sales pitch.
Yeah. He was a smooth guy. He was a smooth brother. He went up there. He's half white too. They played the game right, and he knew he was a puppet. They knew he was a puppet, right?
As most presidents have been for a while.
Right, and then Donald J. Right, we all know that fiasco, like with the whole nation attacking him for literally 4 years in a row. And then there is, relatively speaking, I don't know how to say it without saying it, but the election was not normal. First time they used mail-in ballots, let's just say that. And then now we got the president shit pants, like Biden is literally shitting in his pants in the White House, and like the official fact checkers are saying that he's the oldest president in presidential history, 79 years old. Quite frankly, literally a bumbling fool, falling off of his bicycle the other day. Just like his son, Hunter Biden, like literally his son is a crackhead. And just like this motley crew of people we have running the country. And
it doesn't seem like it's on. So yeah, once we get over to the decline section on this video, we can talk more about that.
Here we go.
Prosperity because the leadership is clearly dominant and has broad support, so no one wants to fight it. During this phase, leaders within the country have to design an excellent system to raise the country's wealth and power. First and foremost, to be great, they must have strong education, which is not just teaching knowledge and skills, but also strong character, civility, and work ethic. These are typically taught in the family, schools, and religious institutions.
Family. Keyword, number one thing being attacked right now in the United States by a certain abbreviation of people using letters.
That provides a healthy respect for rules and laws, order within society, low corruption, and enables them to unite behind a common purpose and work well together.
I mean, can we even say this about America? People united under a common purpose? Absolutely not.
No, I would say, if you go back and look right after World War II, the last time you had a lot of this stuff, going into the 1950s and the 1960s.
I would say the last time America was truly unified was after September 11th.
Well, yeah. I mean, any event like that is going to definitely, get people unified.
Yep.
As they do this, they increasingly shift from producing basic products to innovating and inventing new technologies.
And in America, we're inventing new genders and pronouns. All right, that's it. That's all I'm going to say.
For example, the Dutch rose to defeat the Habsburg Empire and become superbly educated. They became so inventive that they came up with 1/4 of all major inventions in the world, the most important of which was the invention of ships that could travel around the world to collect great riches, and the invention of capitalism, as we know it today, to finance those voyages. They, like all leading empires, enhanced their thinking by being open to the best thinking in the world. As a result, the people in the country become more productive and more competitive in world markets, which shows up in their growing economic output.
And that right there is, I'm not saying China's going to become the number one world currency, but dude, if you want to talk about economic output, China's economy grew 4% during the pandemic. The rest of the world, I think every economy shrank. China was the only one to grow. Why? Take a look at that mask you're wearing. Where do you think it was made? Where do you think those latex gloves were made? Where do you think those goggles were made? Where do you think if you have an iPhone in your hand right now, designed in Apple, made in China? Okay. And I think during the pandemic, in my opinion, TikTok saw a massive jump in its user base in regards to people on there. I mean, what was the most viral thing we talked about in America? Nurses doing TikTok dances during the pandemic. I mean, but no, everybody's like, well, why aren't you wearing a mask? And it's just insanity. It was truly insanity in America. Like, first, got to stay home. It's got to social distance. Then summer comes around. George Floyd happens. Okay, Black Lives Matter. Now we're burning down cities. We're rioting. We're all of a sudden, Corona has taken a stop, and then we're all united under this big, social justice, racial movement. And then after the election, okay, now we're back lockdown. Corona's back. There's a new corona. Just using people. It's textbook. It's textbook manipulation of using the masses to carry out a higher agenda. And if you fucking even say something about it, you're a racist, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're a
Yeah.
right winger, or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like literally thinking critically, right? And stuff like people automatically think like, like you must be far right wing if thinking critically about the Democrats or stuff like this is like, you guys insane? But like, if you want a really based point of view, and I'm kind of talking to the people on my channel, because I think a lot of people on your channel probably have already seen this video, but like, if you want a really based view of what was happening in 2020, go watch our interview on John's channel, Modern Life Dating, with John McAfee. It was on May 27th, 2020. I mean, he did not pull any punches on that one. And whether you totally agree with him or not is one whatever. But like he literally, he wasn't holding back. And I really respected that about him in that interview. He went on a whole tirade about the masks. So I loved it.
Yeah, and it's funny because we were, Charlie and I were some of the last people to interview John McAfee before he was killed, and we were very everything that me and Charlie were talking in private and our views on everything. And the biggest indicator, just to quickly talk about the coronavirus, the biggest indicator for this was in Japan at early in the morning. Okay, you have the surrounding prefectures, which are like basically counties. The surrounding counties going into Tokyo County literally has like millions of people cramming onto a train with literally like 3 inches in front of you, in front of the person, and doing this all in the morning, no social distancing, and flooding people into Tokyo. And then at night, cramming in there face to face, flooding out of Tokyo. And this is happening 7 days a week. And Japan has some of the lowest cases in the world. And a big reason is Japan and the Japanese hate China, and they didn't want to capitulate and give China any clout and be like, okay, yeah, your virus is here, because they hate each other. The Japan and China absolutely despise each other. And just on that alone, me and Charlie were like, dude, if this is a social distancing issue, like everybody in Japan should have coronavirus right now.
Oh yeah.
And it wasn't.
And like I was like literally, because they were like saying at the time like how long it takes to get it and everything. I was just like kind of like looking around. I was like, there must be some sort of shit in the air and everybody's gonna get it. And it's gonna be, kind of like Resident Evil, where everybody is all of a sudden infected and stuff. And like it's a big nothing burger, essentially. Just not really important.
Sebastian says, what if you're at the point where you hate both Democrats and Republicans? Then your mind is free.
Yep.
And rising share of world trade. You can see this happening now as the US and China are roughly comparable in both their economic outputs and their shares of world trade. As countries trade more globally, they must protect their trade routes and their foreign interests from attack, so they develop great military strength. If done well, this virtuous cycle leads to strong income growth, which can be used to finance investments in education, infrastructure, and research and development. They must also develop systems to incentivize and empower those that have the ability to make or take wealth. In all of these cases, the most successful empires used a capitalist approach to develop productive entrepreneurs. Even China, which is run by the Chinese Communist Party, used a form of this capitalist approach. Deng Xiaoping, when asked about this, said, "It doesn't matter if it's a white cat or a black cat, as long as it catches mice. And it's glorious to be rich."
I think that's a very Asian way to look at things right here, because that's this right here.
As long as it catches mice.
The Asian, like Asian culture, Asian society, they're very just grounded in, we just want sanity and results.
Harmony. pragmatism and harmony is a big thing in Asian countries.
Absolutely. Like in America, you have these like big dramatic blow ups, people like losing their shit in IHOP, Waffle House, KFC, McDonald's, Target, Walmart. You've seen it all, right? You don't see that in Asia at all. You do not see that. That is a very, very rare thing because it is embarrassing. And Asia has been around a lot longer in regard, compared to the rest of the world. So they really got like the fundamentals pretty sorted out. But yeah, this is just a very, very pragmatic way of looking things. And there's not a lot of room for bullshit out here as well. Big difference.
And it's glorious to be rich. To do this well, they must develop their capital markets. Most importantly, their lending, bond, and stock markets. That allows people to convert their savings into investments to fund invention and development and share in the successes of those who make great things happen. The Dutch created the first publicly listed company, the Dutch East India Company, and the first stock market to fund it, which were integral parts of the system that produced massive wealth and power. As a natural consequence, the greatest empires developed the world's leading financial centers for attracting and distributing the world's capital. Amsterdam was the world's financial center when the Dutch were preeminent. London, when the British were on top. New York is now. And China is quickly developing its financial centers.
Pause that right there.
Most important.
Is New York that anymore? Nope. I mean, it's shifting already.
Dude, New York has rotted into quite the shithole. From
so many people have left, especially the rich people.
Mm-hmm. And a big part is the government. I mean, and we know which party has controlled that government for a long, 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 long time. Yeah, it's no bueno. Was Hong Kong on that list? I don't think so.
No.
Hong Kong is also
no longer either.
Yeah, right. But I mean, Hong Kong is still up there in regards to like when you talk about being over here in financial hubs.
Yeah, I mean that's why they wanted it. That's why China mainland wanted to take it over, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they literally, reading a little bit about this, they literally are starting to take the idea that the British ever colonized Hong Kong out of the Chinese history books.
Yeah, that well, at least they still believe in the truth about the Tiananmen Square, right?
Sure.
The capitalists, the governments, and the military must work together. Not only did the Dutch work well together, they were one and the same. The Dutch East India Company was granted a trade monopoly from the government and had its own officially sanctioned military to go out into the global markets to make and take wealth. The British followed with the British East India Company and had a similar coordination of their government, business, and military operations. The U.S. military-industrial complex followed suit, as does the Chinese system today. As the country becomes the largest international trading empire, its transactions can be paid with its currency, making it the preferred global medium of exchange. And because their currency is so widely accepted and frequently used, people around the world want to save in it, making it the preferred storehold of wealth, and thus the world's leading reserve currency. The guilder was the world's main reserve currency when the Dutch led world trade, the pound was when the British led, and the dollar has been since the US led.
So this is roughly about, so let me go back to that real quick. The Dutch guilder was 1650.
The world's leading reserve currency. The guilder was the world's main reserve currency when the Dutch led world trade, the pound.
Then 200 years later for the pound, and then about 100 years later for the United States dollar, US dollar. So if we're assuming 100 years, then 2040
was when the British led, and the dollar has been since the US led. Naturally, China's currency is increasingly being used as a reserve currency. Having a reserve currency enables the empire to borrow more than other countries. That advantage is huge. Think about it. People all over the world are eager to save and hence lend back their currency to the empire. Countries without a reserve currency don't have that. And when the empire runs out of its own money, remember the United States in 1971? They can always print more. The exorbitant privilege afforded by the empire's reserve currency leads borrowing to increase and the beginning of a financial bubble. This series of cause and effect relationships leading to mutually supportive financial, political, and military powers, bolstered by the borrowing power of a reserve currency, have gone together since history began to be recorded. All the empires that became the most powerful in the world followed this path to the top. While in the top phase, most of these strengths are sustained, embedded within the fruits of their success are the seeds of their decline. As a rule, as people in these rich and powerful countries earn more, that makes them more expensive and less competitive relative to people in other countries who are willing to work for less.
And you saw this happening in, I would say, the early 2000s is when we had a pretty large exodus of workers in the States. I think the biggest example is call centers. Remember that? Like in America, it used to be American-based call centers. Now you're calling somebody in the Philippines, you're calling somebody in India. And that's because the government raised the taxes on these companies that were employing these people. And the companies were just like, okay, well, we want to keep profits because that's what companies do. And so what did they do? They outsourced it. I know people that were like working for TD Ameritrade and stuff, and they like created the whole script. They created the whole dialogue for the call center people. They created everything. And then what they ended up doing, taking that, sending it to the India department, came back, fired everybody in the American department. So these people didn't even know that they're handing their jobs over. And yeah, I hope Justin S says it right here. Steve from India. Hello, this is Robert. How can I help you? That always gets me. But that's kind of what you're seeing happen right now. And then what country capitalized on that? Our boys over there in China. Charlie, give me 1 second. If you want to make a point or anything, check the private chat. I'm just going to step away.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, I'm going to step away, use the bathroom, but I'll be right back. Give me 2 seconds.
Sure. Oh, yeah, no, I got control of the background. Never mind. Well, we are in intermission here. Let's take a look at Bitcoin. One thing I think, in terms of the point that I wanted to make here is there is, I think one criticism I'll have here of Ray, I do not think it's inevitable by any means that the Chinese yuan becomes the world reserve currency. I think the one thing China has going against it, right, is that people essentially, it's a lack of trust, right? If people look at the alternative motives of what China's trying to do globally, I think most countries don't trust it, and they shouldn't, right? And so with that being said, right, you got the players that are against the United States to some extent, depending on how you're looking at it or in what way, like Iran, China, and Russia, right? But they also don't trust each other. So if countries can't trust each other, how can they use a world reserve currency? I think that's been the advantage of the United States dollar as a reserve currency, is pretty much most countries will trust it, right? But now with cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, that's one thing that we're getting here is a trustless system, right? Trustless, meaning you don't have to trust a particular entity. You don't have to trust an organization. You don't have to trust a corporation. You don't have to trust an individual. You don't have to trust a country, right, to use money in a global way. So you'll start seeing potentially, right, between nations as well. It's going to start with smaller nations like El Salvador, and then it'll go towards bigger nations eventually, right? Where they'll use a trustless system like cryptocurrency or Bitcoin in order to interact with each other. And gold might also come back in that form too.
I wanted to add something as well. I forget the name of the documentary, but there's a Netflix documentary about China and American Factory. Oh, have you watched that, Charlie?
No, I haven't heard of it, I don't think.
Oh man, well, because they just talk about how, like,
what's it called?
American Factory. Definitely worth watching.
It's on YouTube?
It's on Netflix.
Oh, gotcha.
And so they show like a comparison between American Factory and Chinese Factory, right? And like in China, like there's like there's like an area where they have to like pick up glass and stuff, and they send like there's like this like 60 or 70-year-old lady out there, and all she has is some gloves, and she's just like putting glass into a bag, and then it shows the American workers, and they're like, where are the protective goggles, and where are the protective suits, and where are the protective gloves, and like where, like all these like worker safety things, which I get it to an extent, but it's like these workers are trying to create like the perfect utopia situation for their employment, and that's just not how the real world works. And going back to this point here in the video, when they're talking about the dollars is becoming too expensive and too valuable to produce things within the United States, China has it's pretty interesting how they have the $1 mark here symbolizing the cheapest, because like there's still slavery in China, and like these companies, like the Apple factory where the workers were literally jumping out of the building, killing themselves. What the Chinese did? They're like, what can we do? So they put nets around the base of the building. Yep. I wish this was a joke. This is real. So they do have like an unfair competitive advantage. And then you could go black, pretty dark when they talk about like, the Chinese black market and like the Oregon black market and what's going on with the Uyghurs. But their government has like, there's no voting in China. There's not like, who did you vote for? It doesn't work like that. There's no voting in China. And
CCP, the almighty.
Yep, almighty Xi Jinping. We know you're watching, Gigi. We love you.
Well, not even him, like just the CCP in general, right? Like the the whole socialist and authoritarian system. If he is not in power, somebody else will fill it.
Yep.
Right, and it's gonna still keep functioning.
Yep. And then again, you factor in North Korean slaves in China. You factor in that North Korea is basically China's like puppet, and like their little testing ground for creating the nuclear weapons. I mean, you're telling me that North Korea has the resources in North Korea to be producing nuclear weapons? I mean,
right. When their people are literally on the street dying, like not even a joke.
Yeah, man. And oh man, oh Lord, this guy, bro, they don't even wear shoes on China. WERE. I mean, I don't know. I'm just whatever. Let's go back to the video.
At the same time, people in other countries naturally copy the methods and technologies of the leading power, which further reduces the leading power's competitiveness. For example, British shipbuilders had less expensive workers than Dutch shipbuilders. So they hired Dutch designers to design better ships that were built by less expensive British workers, making them more competitive, which led the British to rise and the Dutch to decline. Also, as people become richer, they tend not to work as hard. They enjoy.
What does that sound like?
What you talking about, Wills?
enjoy more leisure, pursue the finer and less productive things in life, and at the extreme become decadent. Values change.
I mean, decadent. If that does not describe America right now,
Yeah, it's a good word for it.
I don't know what I mean. America is the most decadent nation on the earth, in my opinion. I'm trying to think which nation is far more decadent than us. I mean,
I don't
did you
think
see
there's any.
Christina Aguilera the other day on stage?
Sorry?
Did you see Christina Aguilera the other day on the stage?
I can only imagine. No, I have not seen her in years.
She's wearing this big green suit, and in the front of her crotch is just this huge dick, and she's dancing around singing, celebrating transgenderism, and
Jesus Christ.
decadent is the
Hey,
word.
whatever you do for that buck, I guess.
Yeah, decadent.
From generation to generation during the rise to the top, from those who had to fight to achieve wealth and power to those who inherited it. They're less battle-hardened, steeped in luxuries, and accustomed to the easy life, which makes them more vulnerable to challenges. The golden era of the Dutch Empire.
I mean, America has safe spaces because your feelings are hurt. That's it.
And the Victorian era of the British Empire. Were such high prosperity periods like this. As people get used to doing well, they increasingly bet on the good times continuing and borrow money to do that, which grows into financial bubbles. Naturally, the financial gains come unevenly, so the wealth gap grows. Wealth gaps are self-reinforcing because rich people use their greater resources to reinforce their powers. For example, they give greater privileges to their children, like better education, and they influence the political system to their advantage. This causes the gaps in values, politics, and opportunities to grow between the rich haves and the poor have-nots. Those who are less well off feel the system is unfair, so resentments grow. But as long as the living standards of most people are still rising, these gaps and resentments don't boil over into conflict. Having the world's reserve currency inevitably leads to borrowing excessively and contributes to the country building up large debts with foreign lenders. While this boosts spending power over the short term, it weakens the country's financial health and weakens the currency over the long term. In other words, when borrowing and spending are strong, the empire appears very strong, but its finances are in fact being weakened.
And just to give you guys a little context,
It's a perfect explanation right there.
That's just all the USA debt going on right there.
Is that growing faster than just Jeff Bezos' net worth? Because I think he's making something ridiculous, like millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars. I forget what it is per second, right? It's like, which one's growing faster?
I gotta say, dude, Amazon Prime, I use it like religiously here, and it's just efficient. And just Jeff Bezos deserves every dollar.
He's a smart man.
He does. It's not. I mean, he's married to that mongrel, but other than that, but I mean, yeah. What I think this is $30 trillion. Yeah, let's see. That's billion. Yep. So we're at 30 trillion, and it's going up here. That's just 100,000. It looks like it's going up $100,000 every like 3 seconds.
Well, remember, like during the Bush administration, we were talking about numbers for the Iraq War. Like $60 billion was considered a lot of money, right? For the government to spend. You talk about $60 billion nowadays. It's like, chump change.
Baby money. I'll rewind this. I won't interrupt this section, but I just want to show you guys like to quantify the debt and then what's exactly happening. We'll play this part uninterrupted.
Having the world's reserve currency inevitably leads to borrowing excessively and contributes to the country building up large debts with foreign lenders. While this boosts spending power over the short term, it weakens the country's financial health and weakens the currency over the long term. In other words, when borrowing and spending are strong, the empire appears very strong, but its finances are in fact being weakened. The borrowing sustains the country's power beyond its fundamentals by financing both domestic overconsumption and international military conflicts required to maintain the empire. Inevitably, the cost of maintaining and defending the empire becomes greater than the revenue it brings in, so having an empire becomes unprofitable. For example, the Dutch Empire overextended around the world and fought war after increasingly expensive war with the British and other European powers to protect its territory and trade routes. The British Empire similarly became massive, bureaucratic, and lost its competitive advantages as rival powers, particularly Germany, soared, leading to an increasingly expensive arms race and World War. The U.S. has spent about $8 trillion on foreign wars and their consequences since September 11, and trillions more for other military operations and for supporting military bases in 70 countries. And it still isn't spending enough to support its military competition with China in the area around China.
Sounds
In this
sustainable.
cycle,
Say that again.
It sounds sustainable.
How many transgender soldiers are they putting on the front lines in China? Do you know? Do you have the numbers?
I would assume 0.
How dare you?
How
know.
dare you?
Yeah. Do you know they did a poll in polling all the nations? Let me see if I can pull it up. But they did a poll of nations saying who would defend their country. And do you know what country ranked in at number 1?
No.
Our boys in China.
They have a lot of propaganda right now, basically aggrandizing more too, like in terms of like movies and entertainment.
Oh yeah, I mean, they are. They constantly show these like simulations as well of some nation attacking China.
Yeah,
all the vehicles are American looking and everything. They don't say it, and they just show China dominating
you got
it.
the John Cena type, character in there, and like as soon as they kill him, it's like yeah.
And it's it's I'm not down like American military. I mean, our tech, the superiority of our tech is pretty lit.
Yeah,
It's the soldiers I'm worried about. And I think just the sheer bodies. I think China. I don't know, to be honest. I don't know factually, but I would assume. I don't know. Let me just check real quick. China's military. China's size of the military.
Got enough bodies to throw around in terms of population, that's for sure.
So they have 2 million people in their military and 500,000 in their reserve. And then the United States military size, the United States 1.4 million. So yeah, the United States is heavily outnumbered by China. They have a surplus of 600,000 ground troops. However, the one thing is, I don't think anybody's going to be invading America anytime soon, because there's a lot of guns. I mean, and there are a lot of people up in the mountains of Colorado and Texas, just like with pounds of ammo, waiting for the day. You know what I mean? But China is attacking in the smartest way. which is psychologically and morally. I believe China and Russia are definitely in cahoots to bring down the states.
Did you hear about this?
No, what's that all about?
Oh, I forgot his name. Jesse something was the CEO of Kraken, right? He literally just said like, because like basically he's like all this, we have to have a certain amount of these types of people working here, those types of people working here, all that stuff. He's like, screw that. We just want to run a business that, basically makes finances available to, the most human beings possible globally because so many people are unbanked. He's just like, we just want to keep moving forward. And so there's a lot of people who are like, you can't do that. You have to have, X percentage of whatever people, working in your company. And he was just like, yeah, if you disagree with what we're doing here, literally we will pay you to leave. I think they paid them like 4 months severance. And so, yeah, it's just kind of interesting to see that. And I think, yeah, it's them and Binance right now, which are extremely solvent in the crypto space. They're
Binance.
hiring.
Binance also led by our buddy that we met, IRL.
And he was smart enough to get out of there, right? He came to Japan first and then went to Malta and then now the international man of mystery. But, which companies do you have that are, not doing well? Well, Coinbase, right? They literally fired, I think, like a bunch of employees that had only been working there 90 days. They'd recently hired them and then they just fired a bunch of them. And they were the ones with, a lot of that woke stuff going on over the last couple of years. So it's just interesting to see who's solvent and who's not in the crypto space when it comes to corporate level.
I mean, it's clearly evident. You get woke, go broke. Not to get like political or whatever, but in the Disney movie recently, Lightyear, they put out a Disney movie, right? And Disney went out of their way to portray a lesbian couple hugging in the movie, and like they went out of their way to show that it was a lesbian couple, and ticket sales is crashing. I mean, people just don't want to see the woke ideology. Like they don't want to be like, people don't want to go to the movie and be lectured on how you should think in society. Like people go to movies for escapism and stuff like that. You like when I sit down and I watch Iron Man, I know nobody's gonna build a suit and fly around and kill terrorists and shit. That's why I'm watching it, because I know it's fake and it's stimulating my imagination. I mean, you want to talk look at the most successful movie franchise of all time, Star Wars, and they killed it with 3 movies by injecting all the feminism garbage into it. And even the new most recent Obi-Wan series, complete garbage, filled with feminism ideology, just trash, and just shitting on him, like, oh, here's this poor old stupid white guy, he's such a pussy. And it's just, yeah. And now that the saving grace, culturally speaking, of the Marvel cinematic universe was Iron Man and Captain America, two straight white males, public enemy number 1, right? And now that they're both pretty much dead, the only thing they can do to save the franchise is have Spider-Man take the helm. But they're having all these woke ideologies in there. They had the first gay men kiss in Eternals. Eternals flopped. And just and they had a underage girl who is a lesbian in Doctor Strange Multiverse Madness. And it's just I don't know who's behind it, but it does seem like it's just a pervasive agenda to I don't know who's doing this, but it's fucking weird, mate. It's fucking weird. Anyways, yeah, let's continue here.
The richer countries eventually get deeper into debt by borrowing from poorer countries that save more. It's one of the early signs of a wealth and power shift. This started in the United States in the 1980s, when it had a per capita income 40 times that of China's, and started borrowing from Chinese who wanted to save in dollars because the dollar was the world's reserve currency. Similarly, the British borrowed a lot of money from its much poorer colonies, and the Dutch did the same at their time. If the empire begins to run out of new lenders, those holding their currency begin to look to sell and get out rather than to buy, save, lend, and get in. And the strength of the empire begins to decline. The decline. The decline comes from internal economic weakness, together with internal fighting, or costly external fighting, or both. Typically, the decline comes gradually and then very suddenly. When debts become very large and there is an economic downturn, and the empire can no longer borrow the money necessary to repay its debts, the financial bubble bursts. This creates great domestic hardships and forces the country to choose between defaulting on its debts or printing a lot of new money. It always chooses to print a lot of.
It's like, do I responsibly get out of this conundrum, or do I just print more money? What you think?
I mean, this is like, personally speaking, going back to this little arc here. I believe we're here at the printing money credit, and then I'll let the thing continue. But anyway,
there's one more phase,
right? Money. It always chooses to print a lot of new money. At first, gradually, and eventually massively. That devalues the currency and raises inflation. For the Dutch, this was the financial crisis brought about by financial excesses and paying for the Fourth Anglo-Dutch War. Similarly, for the British, it was paying for its financial excesses and its debts from the two world wars. And for the US, it's been 3 cycles of debt finance booms and busts since the 90s, with the central bank stepping in each time with stronger measures.
Stepping in each time with stronger members. How much was it? How many trillions was printed for pandemic relief?
I'd have to look it up, but just ridiculous numbers.
You're gonna pull it up on the back end there, because
sure.
And the thing is this, for me, guys, I understand that we need to keep on printing money. So in my mind, I'm like, what is this next fucking thing they're gonna do that justifies like the amount of money they need to print to keep this fucking Ponzi going, man? Like,
yes. So I mean, there's a few different sources, but essentially, right? There was, during COVID itself, I think about over the course of a year from March 2020 to March 2021, it was about 5.2 trillion. And then, and then, all the money, including QE, in addition to that, because that started before COVID and continued after, what you consider March of 2020, all the money printed, during that period of time was about 13 trillion.
Good Lord have mercy. Oh, are you looking at the NASDAQ.com?
Yeah.
Sweet baby Jesus, man. Jesus. So then the next time around, theoretically speaking, unless we're dumb, which is always a possibility because we're dumb humans, we need to print more than 15 trillion next go round.
Yep. And what's the word after trillion? I think it's quadrillion. It's like I've never heard that before, until recently. And it's like, barely heard people talking about trillions of dollars. Like, I think people are counting down, like, how long is it going to be before we get our first trillionaire?
Yeah.
Right. And that's all. And then when you bring it down to, the people who are watching us, the retail traders, right, the normal average everyday people, this is why a million, everybody is like, the song by the Bare Naked Ladies and stuff, if I only had $1 million, that type of deal. It's like, $1 million is not really what it used to be. It's like, that's, why you have to shoot for higher goals, of course, over a longer period of time, over this decade. But if you're not shooting, in my opinion, if you're not shooting to have a net worth of at least $10 million by the end of this decade, like, it can be a rough go of it, for, going towards the rest of the life.
Yeah.
10 million is a new 1 million in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah, here it is. And could happen in a short time. So prepare. 2024 will be a key year, most likely the beginning of a civil war in the US. they go into that as well. We're going to talk about that. I mean, they cover it, but I mean, uh, let's just watch. I could go on for hours on this fucking topic.
I mean, there's a lot of facets to it for sure.
Yeah, you know, but what's happening is, I mean, decadence, decadence. Okay. That is just, I mean, right there. This is glorified.
I mean, if that's not a sign of something wrong, like I don't know what is.
And this is a model. This is championed as something to celebrate.
Yeah, what does the word model mean? A model for other people to follow, right?
You know,
Which,
and I'm not insulting this individual in any shape or form. Okay. But I mean, from a medical standpoint, this is not the ideal way for a human to operate in ultimate fashion.
sounds just, I was just going to say, it looks just as sustainable as that military industrial complex that we have going on worldwide.
You know, when we're celebrating this, again, you know, it's just, it's, yeah, it's just, you know, I saw this. Have you ever seen The Greatest Showman?
No.
So it's about P.T. Barnum and how he made like the freak show, right? Like the bearded lady and the really, really fat person and the really, really tall guy and like all the freaks. And there's this cartoon I've seen recently, and it's him going to his crowd and being like, "Hey guys, listen, like you're not freaks anymore." And like you're all out of a job. You know? It's like Syndrome, you know, Syndrome from Incredibles says, you know, if everybody's special, nobody's special, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, shout out to Tap 2. He says $5 super chat. Using shame to correct social deviancy should become the norm again. And guys, just do us a favor. If you could please kindly smash the like button on Charlie's channel and my channel. I'm looking at the back end data, and I just had a certain amount of likes on my channel, and the actual number of likes went down. I really don't know what's happening. That's pretty weird. I don't know. You guys know that they kind of you know, YouTube is not necessarily the most. They just have their secrets.
Yeah, you know, YouTube loves that free speech. You know, clearly
They do. They do. Yeah. Shout out to Susan Wojcinski. But yeah, you know. So here we go. Yeah, I like what Adam Simmons has to say, which is very true. And this is why we wanted to give you guys a kind of a message of hope. He says, "I'm past caring about economies. Recessions come around every 10 years or so. We've been in depression since March 2020 anyway. If you've got a brain, cunning, and guile, you'll always win." And that's the thing. If you're watching us here, you have to understand that you are literally in the top 10% of humans who are actually, you could be out there watching YouTube prank videos and in OnlyFans and so much garbage, but you're here. Even if you don't apply this, but you're learning somewhat, you like, we're not doing this to give you a sense of fear. We're not gonna be like, oh my God, like be afraid, and the only thing that's gonna save you is the crypto mindset course. Like, it's not anything like that. We really just want to tell you guys straight up that what we're going through, how it's happened again, and then again, like he said at the beginning, the greatest indicator of what's going to happen in the future is by looking in the past, right? That's true in economies. That's true in psychology. I mean, it's a pretty stable piece of advice across a lot of things. And you know, it's like if you have a girlfriend or a wife and she cheated on you once, she's probably gonna cheat on you again. You know, if you have like a guy you catch like smoking in the break room or doing some degenerate shit, like you're probably gonna catch this idiot doing that shit again. And human nature is human nature, and we're just kind of in this cycle right now with what's happening in America, and it gets more in detail here. You can see it. I'm gonna catch up with these super chats real quick. Tap two again, $5. He says the creature from Jekyll Island Reddit. Sorry, the creature from Jekyll Island. Read it and understand history, people.
Yep. Super important book that I think a lot of people don't even know exists.
Say no to Canadian Bill C-11. So, I don't know what that is, but thank you.
No clue.
But yeah, let's continue. So, Millionaire says 300 Spartans watching right now. Actually, we have 448 people watching live. So with my channel and Charlie's channel, and eventually we're gonna throw DCC's channel in here, and we're gonna have a three-headed spear, and we're working really hard behind the scenes for you guys because we know things are gonna get like really rocky. But again, it's all about who can endure. You know what I mean? And this is why during the height of the bull market, not me, not Charlie, not Miguel, never once did you hear us say, quit your job, take out that mortgage. We were saying, don't do that, be responsible. And I kept on saying, like, this is coming to an end. At some point, this is going to come to an end. It's going to be hard. Now we're in hard mode. Now we're in the hard times. And you know, the lie that just came out today with Jerome Powell saying, oh, the economy is very strong. I mean, I think it's good for the idiots because they're going to be like, okay, yay. Are the markets rallying at all from that announcement? Let me just check real quick. No, Bitcoin's down to 3%.
Yeah, that live stream is still going, by the way. So once we're done with this,
might as well.
We can take a little bit of a look there. And I did want to play that central bank digital currency video after this. I think it is kind of interesting.
Let's get back to the video. And are you guys liking this? If you're liking this, go ahead and send $1,000 super chat to each of us. No, just checking.
Be sure to smash the like and subscribe as well.
Smash the like button, and then definitely share this video with somebody you care about. Let them know what's going on, because again, information is power. And to be honest with you, you know, go around today. If you're watching, go around and ask just like 10 random people, do you know what the Federal Reserve is? And then ask them, what do you know? What part of the government is the Federal Reserve? It's a trick question, and just watch the reaction and see what happens.
When the government has problems funding itself, when there are bad economic conditions, and living standards for most people are declining, and there are large wealth, values, and political gaps, internal conflict between the rich and the poor, as well as different ethnic, religious, and racial groups, greatly increases. This leads to political extremism that shows up as populism of the left or the right.
And political extremism is at its highest point right now in American history.
Yep, divide and conquer.
Mm-hmm. Those of the left seek to redistribute the wealth, while those of the right seek to maintain the wealth in the hands of the rich. Typically, during such times, taxes on the rich rise, and when the rich fear their wealth and well-being will be taken away, they move to places, assets, and currencies they feel safer in. These outflows reduce the empire's tax revenue, which leads to a classic, self-reinforcing, hollowing out process. When the flight of wealth gets bad enough, governments outlaw it. Those seeking to get out begin to panic. These turbulent conditions undermine productivity, which shrinks the economic pie and causes more conflict about how to divide the shrinking resources. Populist leaders emerge from both sides and pledge to take control and bring about order. That's when democracy is most challenged, because it fails to control the anarchy. And it is when the move to a strong populist leader who will bring order to the chaos is most likely. As conflict within the country escalates, it leads to some form of revolution or civil war to redistribute wealth and force the necessary big changes. This can be peaceful and maintain the existing order, but it's more often violent and changes the order. For example, the Roosevelt Revolution to redistribute wealth was relatively peaceful and maintained the existing internal order. while the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, and the Chinese Revolution were much
The guillotine was invented during the French Revolution.
more violent and led to new internal orders. This internal conflict makes the empire weak and vulnerable to rising external rivals who, seeing this domestic weakness, are more inclined to mount a challenge. This raises the risk of great international conflict, especially if the rival has built up a comparable military. Defending oneself and one's empire against rivals requires great military spending, which has to occur as domestic economic conditions are deteriorating and the empire can least afford it. Since there is no viable system for peacefully adjudicating international disputes, these conflicts are typically resolved through tests of power. As bolder challenges are made, the leading empire is faced with the difficult choice of fighting or retreating. Fighting and losing is the worst outcome, but retreating is bad too, as it cedes progress to the rival and signals that the empire is weak to those.
I think that's what's going to happen between USA and China.
Yeah, and I think Tokyo is going to be a big pawn in that, or Japan in general, because it's one of the places. I mean, it's just one of those. Not saying that China's going to take it over or anything. It's just, what do you call it in terms of?
That's in their playbook.
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, they want to, right?
But they didn't forget that.
No. But I'm just saying, like, it's one of the things where it's like, that's where the U.S. could fall back to, but that's about it.
I think China's plan, personally, is to psychologically weaken the populace of America, physically weaken them by, letting this whole fat shaming agenda go on, and then
bio warfare.
The pronouns, the genders, the transitioning, I think all that stuff slowly chips away at us in the meantime, because they know a head-to-head conflict is just not going to be good for anybody on the planet at all. So they're just going to keep on. I mean, their plan's working, the TikTok psyop, all that stuff. Just continue to make the Americans weak, continue to inject feminism into fucking the country. In China, like the feminist groups and all the fucking outlets that these leaders are snuffed out from like the Chinese like social media, like the Weibos and the all that stuff. And they also recently nuked a lot of the LGBT stuff, like completely, just like we're banned, it's illegal, fuck you, we don't care, and like, send that shit to the States. In addition to that, I mean, you know as well as I know, but I don't think maybe some of our viewers may not know, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Wikipedia, Twitter, Google, all these things are completely banned in China. The joke is they call it the Great Firewall of China. You have to have a VPN to access it. And the average Chinese person, they don't give a shit. They have everything they need on WeChat, Weibo, what's that one? Their YouTube source? It's like BB something. It's like
Baidu?
No, it's Baidu is like another blog thing. Now I forget what it's called, but it's there like YouTube. It's like 2 B words in a row. I forget what it's called. I'll go to speaking. This is you want to talk about super base. Our buddy John Fish is in the house. They want to reduce world populations. They'll send people out to war to kill them off. You talk about a guy that is super based and really sees it how it is. John is the man. John is a great guy too in real life. He's a really great guy. And 50% of me saying that is because I'm terrified of him. Well, I love you, John. John's a great guy. But yeah, I think that's what's going to happen. I think they can continue psychologically weaken the population of America. I mean, Americans are all-time weakness. I mean, emotionally unstable, emotionally weak, biggest crybabies out there. I think people praying and hoping for America comeback are lost. It's not going to happen. And, that's what's going to happen. China's going to keep on building their military because they're not stopping, They're building aircraft carriers. They are like, their military may not be as advanced as ours, but again, it's the people who are operating the military that I believe is questionable from the United States. And then on top of that, the Chinese are just going to continue to build their military. It's kind of like the Russians in World War II. Russians didn't have the best equipment, but they had bodies. Russians were the ones that got killed. Everybody cries about the Jews and getting killed in World War II, and it is what it is. Like, no offense to the Jews, yeah, I understand
Still
what
terrible.
happened. It is, but the Russians, I think like 20 million Russians died because they're just, he was just like, march,
Yep.
go, kill. If you die, you die. It is what it is. Go. Mother Russia needs you to do it. Thank you to William S. 499 super chat says, thank you, John and Charlie. This is shaping up to be one of your best videos. Keep up the good work. Thanks so much, guys. Just please smash the like button because we really need it. And shout out to like the one person watching us on Twitch, Polar Knights. BlackRock owns 95% of wealth. What they say goes. That's true too. Oh yes. Say what? Shout out to my brother Steven. He says 27 million Russians died. So yeah. But again, like, it's just, and then this right here, millionaire says Taiwan is a matter of time, without a doubt. Without a doubt. It's over, bro. Russia is going to take Ukraine. China's going to take Taiwan, and America is going to invent more genders, and that's it.
Yeah, the one critical Achilles heel to China, which is kind of a saving grace to some extent, is the fact that they try to move sometimes a little bit too fast and with very, very low quality but high quantity.
Reckless. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think, going and talking about that conflict as it plays out, the early stages of it, they're going to have a lot of W's, right? Like basically win, 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 win. But then once they get that peak arrogance, right, it could definitely flip against them. I think one of the stories that I like to cite is the Shinkansen, or the bullet train here in Japan. The Chinese, I forget which company it was in China, but basically they bought the technology from Mitsubishi here in Japan for the bullet train. They put it in China, and I think Mitsubishi told them something like, don't drive it at more than X kilometers per hour, or something like 200 kilometers per hour or something. Of course, what did China do? Let's crank it up, baby. And this was back in maybe 2017 or something. And the train literally fell off the tracks, and it was a raised track, right? Literally fell right off the track. And this was like towards the evening. So instead of being like, oh shit, there's an accident here, we gotta help people out, they literally tried to bury the train under the ground right next to the track. Right. So that right there is kind of China in a nutshell, on a large scale. So, if they start, going towards more of those types of actions, right, they will fail long term. But they're kind of their own worst enemy to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, and then that's just kind of like the Chinese mentality. We have a member of our communities. He's a Chinese guy. He's just a very he's a very just aggressive, masculine guy. And we were advising him earlier with his portfolio, like, you probably like just put in maybe 50% max and kind of hold back. We check in with him later. He's like, yeah, I went like 95% in and I made a shitload of money. God, I'm like, all right, buddy.
Get rich or die trying.
They're out there. They're out there. So, anyways, let's go back to the video.
Yeah, the key thing with him is, when he got into profit, he took it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Countries that are considering which side to be on. Poor economic conditions cause more fighting for wealth and power, which inevitably leads to some kind of war. Wars are terribly costly. At the same time, they produce the tectonic shifts that realign the new waters to the new realities of wealth and power in the world. When those holding the reserve currency and debt of the declining empire lose faith and sell them, that marks the end of its big cycle. Of the roughly 750 currencies that existed since 1700, less than 20% now exist, and all of them have been devalued. For the Dutch, this happened after their defeat in the Fourth Anglo-Dutch War, when they weren't able to repay the massive debts they built up during it. This led to a run on the Bank of Amsterdam and a desperate sell-off, forcing massive money printing, which devalued the currency and the empire into irrelevance.
Sounds
To
like
the
cell
British,
token.
this happened after.
What'd you say?
I said sounds like cell token.
Yeah. They had a rally. Did you see that?
Oh, I know. I was just half joking. Just
Oh
when
yeah.
I started.
I mean, yeah, my faith in that organization is dead.
Yeah. Anyways, moving on.
After World War II, when despite their victory, they could not repay the massive debts they borrowed to fund their war effort. This led to a series of money printing, devaluations, and sell-offs in the British pound, as the US and the dollar emerged dominant and created a new world order. At the time of this recording, the United States hasn't yet reached this point. While it has massive debt, spends more than it earns, and funds this deficit with more borrowing and printing huge amounts of new money, the big sell-off in dollars and dollar debt hasn't yet begun. And while there are great internal and external conflicts occurring for all the classic reasons, they've not yet crossed the line to become wars. Eventually, out of these conflicts, whether they're violent or not, come new winners who get together and restructure the losers' debts and political systems and establish the new world order. Then the old cycle and empire ends and the new one begins, and they do it all over again. That's a lot of detail I just threw at you to paint a picture of how the typical big cycle transpires. Of course, not all of them transpire in exactly this way, but most largely do. So much so that it seems like the stories of rises and declines stay essentially the same, and the only things that change are the clothes the characters wear and the technologies they use. So, where are we heading?
So let me ask you this, Charlie. Where do you think we are right now? Hold on. Let me pause it on that part.
So, where are we heading?
Where do you think we are?
We're between money printing and credit and revolutions and wars.
Yeah, I think we're heavily in the print money and credit.
Yeah, I mean, we've already experienced like a huge chunk of that, right? And the revolutions, wars, you could also include social unrest. That's pretty much, I mean, we've already experienced some of that, but I don't think that's like that, like it, like the money printing and stuff hasn't quite peaked, and the wars and revolutions, has barely just started.
I'll just say this. And when it comes to the wars and revolutions, there's a couple new technological X factors here. One, we do know, okay, let's just talk. We're all adults here. Okay. Clearly, the Democrats and Republicans in America hate each other, right? And if we are heading into civil war, all I'm going to say is this: one side really hates guns, the other side really loves guns. And to top it off, there is a new invention out there called 3D printing, where even if you ban guns, you can print a gun at home. And the technology for that is only getting better and better. Third factor, in my opinion, is AI. I'm not saying like they're going to get sentient and go all John Connor on us, but I would not doubt the government coming out with automated police force AI in the future. I mean, if you think that's far fetched, you're retarded. That is absolutely a possibility because you can rationalize with a person on the other side of the gun, but there's no, like Sarah Connor said in Terminator, there's nothing, you can't rationalize with a machine. It's programmed to do one thing and one thing only. And so as we head into this revolution and wars section, again, we're not saying, we're not trying to be fear mongering or whatever. But history does repeat itself, and with what we saw in 2020, and quite frankly, there's a lot of violent crimes and stuff happening right now. A lot of people getting robbed. A personal friend of ours was wearing a fake Rolex and fake gold chain in New York City, and he got held up at gunpoint and robbed. And and he's a big boy. He's a big dude. He's a big
He
old black
throws a
guy.
good punch.
He is a big man. If that man hits you, you're gonna go to bed. And, great friend of ours, and he's a father too, man. And just having to have a gun in your face and get robbed. I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff happening. I've just seen something in London recently. People are getting robbed for jewelry. People are getting robbed for watches in the United States. Women are robbing rich men. They're like drugging them and having sex with them in hotel rooms, then walking out with like $100,000 Patek Philippe's and stuff. So, yeah, man.
Before we continue in here, the one thing that I think is really interesting about this part of the cycle with the decline, right, is so if we're like going towards the peak of the money printing and then going towards the beginning of the revolutions and wars, social unrest, whatever, that debt and political restructuring down the road, I think some people are like, what does that look like? Right. I think we've talked about this before, but the book, The Sovereign Individual, has a really interesting take on this about how it might play out this century. I would say listen or read that book. And yeah, it does give some pretty interesting takes on how that political restructuring could go. I think one of their more interesting points is, this is a big if, but if the government could ever get their shit together, right? If the government can run like more like a capitalistic type structure where they actually have incentives instead of, incentives to run the government like a business instead of incentives to run it like a Ponzi scheme, that actually would be a restructure that could work out well long term. But I don't really have too high of a hope of that happening anytime soon. But if you do read that book, essentially it says it gets better and worse before it gets better, if that makes sense, right? Like there's some things that I think in the changing world order people will be very shocked by, and they think, wow, that's a really, it's gotten worse, right? But then we have other things like cryptocurrency and stuff here where, as long as you take control, I think somebody earlier said, people just can't lead themselves. That's one of the biggest problems here, right? So really having that self-sovereignty, really understanding how that works on an international level is so important. But yeah, if you just listen to that book, read that book, there's some interesting takes on that.
Yeah, man. There's a lot going on right now, and I think it can be very overwhelming for a lot of you guys. But ultimately, the thing is this: we live in a time anymore, like 100 years ago. If you were poor, like that was it. That was your life. Like you're fucking poor. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Yeah, your dad was a peasant. You're a peasant, and you're gonna have peasant children, and that's it. But the only difference between me and Charlie and you guys in regards to where we are with our intellect and our earning capabilities and stuff like that is just the information we've consumed and the people we've surrounded ourselves around. I know it's like said over and over and over again, but you are the sum of the 5 people you hang around with, including your net worth. So up that average, spend time with people who are better than you and something better in an area that you're trying to get better at. And don't become a victim. Don't take a perspective of helplessness. You know what I mean? It's like literally the most millionaires in the world have been generated in this generation. And it's like new money. The majority of millionaires in the United States are new money.
And if you look at technology as it expands, right, it expands at exponential growth. And if you took the power of the internet and you found a way to monetize that as what are we speaking on right now, right? If you were able to take part of in that change, right, you can become extremely wealthy. We're in the same thing with cryptocurrency, right? If you can understand it and you can take advantage of it, for over a long period of time, you can also make that extremely valuable for you. In my opinion, we're basically in, what do you call it? We're basically in probably the best money-making opportunity in human history, especially this decade. Right? I think a
Right
lot of
now.
people right now, exactly. I think a lot of people were thinking, well, I should have bought Bitcoin under $100. It's like the best price to buy. Well, it's like, yeah, of course, but you've got new projects coming out all the time, and if you talk to the Bitcoin maxis, they talk about all altcoins are shit. It's like, yeah, 99 or 95% of them are terrible, but
Probably 99.
yeah, 99.9, but generally speaking, there will be ones that win out. And so, identifying those opportunities, it's just like we're in the best opportunity that humans have ever had to make money, period. So take advantage of it.
Yep. Let's continue.
The future. Most empires have their time in the sun and inevitably decline. Reversing a decline is difficult because that requires undoing a lot that's already been done, but it's possible. By looking at these indicators, it's pretty easy to see which stage of the big cycle an empire is in, how fit it is, and whether its condition is improving or worsening, which can help one estimate how many years it has left. Still, these estimates aren't precise, and the cycle can be extended if those in charge pay attention to their vital signs and improve them.
I don't think America's making any kind of turnaround personally.
Not soon.
For example, knowing that a person is 60 years old, how fit they are, whether they smoke or not, and a few other basic vital signs, one can estimate the person's longevity. One can do that with empires and their vital signs too. It won't be precise, but it will be broadly indicative and give clear direction on steps to take to increase longevity. It's most often the case that a nation's greatest war is with itself over whether or not it can make the hard decisions needed to sustain success. As for what we need to do, it comes down to just two things: earn more than we spend and treat each other well. All other things I mentioned, strong education, inventiveness, being competitive, and all the rest, are just ways of getting at these two things. It's easy to measure if we're doing them. So like people who want to get fit, let's get on the program and improve our vitals. Let's do that individually and collectively. My goal for sharing this picture of how the world works and a few principles for dealing with it well is to help you recognize where we are and the challenges we face, and to make the wise decisions needed to navigate these times well. Since there is a lot more to discuss and we are out of time, you can learn more in my book, Principles for Dealing with the Changing World.
And then he plugs his book there. So, you want to prep that clip for the CBD, the coin as well. You're muted there, buddy.
Yep, I got that one ready. If I can share my screen.
So the purpose of the video today, guys, was just to really kind of give you a little education and perspective of what we believe to be happening. Obviously, we're not super genius market predictors, or we know exactly where the economy is heading, because quite frankly nobody does. But there do seem to be symptoms in what's happening with the US dollar from our perspective, at least. And
It's important to discuss.
it
A
is
lot of people aren't even talking about this type of stuff.
Oh, I guarantee for the people watching, literally 99% of your social circle is not talking about this stuff. And if they are, you're probably rich, bottom line. But it's not to spread fear, it's just spread knowledge and put it in your heads that This is just kind of a natural order of things. Don't feel helpless. Don't feel weak. Don't whine about it. And this too shall pass. Just be prepared. Like I said about the whole Rona pandemic, I said the people, in my opinion, this is going to be, what I'm about to say is going to sound kind of cold and heartless, but I'm just I'm just being very pragmatic with what's happening right now. I think the people that are putting the most of their faith in institutions and governments are the ones that are going to suffer the most. And
Yep. If you think that modern monetary theory will save you, if you think socialism and spreading the wealth because Elon has too much, if you think that's going to save you, I think you're going to have a rude awakening when it's a little bit too late.
people who want wealth distribution are stupid, lazy, and poor. I mean, it doesn't work. Communism doesn't work.
Nope.
And it's never going to work. It's capitalism, and it's just such an entitlement to think about that. Like, but people, people are lazy shits, man. Majority of people are lazy shits. And
yeah, they want that free stimmy check, instead of working for it.
Yeah, and that's why democracies always devolve into socialism, because eventually it gets to the point that the population just votes for the person that gives them the most free shit. Remember, what was his name? Andrew Wang, or what was his name?
Yeah.
Is it Wang? Was it?
Yep, I think so.
The Chinese guy.
The guy who was talking about UBI.
He's talking about universal base. No, I don't think it was Wang. I don't think they run with Wang as the last name.
Yeah, I can't remember.
So
Andrew Yang.
Yang. YANG.
Yeah. Close enough.
Andrew Yang, not Wang. Although Wang is a Chinese last name. Yeah, Andrew Yang, he had gained some momentum by talking about that. And you want to talk about political corruption. I mean, poor Bernie Sanders, as much as a loser as he is, he was the guy that the population of the Democratic Party wanted to win and run against Trump. You know what I mean? People wanted Bernie Sanders. But the way they had it structured on the Democratic Party, they're like, nope, Hillary, nope, Biden. And,
decent.
The maturity of our audience. Somebody had to say it.
Yeah, the Dems are funny in that way. It's like, let's run these primaries, so that we can get a fair, what do you call it? Basically representation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they knew who they were going to appoint, to try to run for president. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You think the other people actually had a chance to run? Like, no.
And if you voted for Jill Stein, you're an idiot. Anyways, you want to play that CBDC thing?
Yeah, I'll pull it up here. I just gotta share the screen.
The CBDC is a central bank digital currency. They're basically copying Bitcoin. Here's our buddy Jerome Powell.
Yep. So they're using. We'll just play it first, and we can talk about it a little bit. But definitely part of that new world order to some extent.
Looking forward.
Can you hear that?
Yep, perfectly.
Okay, cool.
Looking forward, rapid changes are taking place in the global monetary system that may affect the international role of the dollar in the future. Most major economies already have or are in the process of developing instant 24/7 payments. Our own FedNow service will be coming online in 2023. And in light of the tremendous growth in crypto assets and stablecoins, we are examining whether a U.S. central bank digital currency would improve upon what is an already safe and efficient domestic payment system. As our white paper on this topic notes, a U.S. CBDC could also potentially help maintain the dollar's international standing. Looking forward, rapid changes are taking place.
So yeah, I mean, they're just basically admitting that, this technology can be something that, just massively helps them, try to maintain relevance. Doesn't mean it's good. Doesn't mean I'm hoping that it exists or anything like that. But it seems inevitable.
I don't know if I'm gonna make it to 55 with all the stress.
Yeah,
But like, it's just, oh my god. I love how they have it. I love how they have their own white paper now. Yeah,
the United States now has a white paper.
yeah.
Great.
Is it written in crayon? Like,
It's just as good as most of those ICOs from 2017, I hear.
yeah. And so, yeah, I'd like to shout out to Wes here. Was his, and yet most people swear up and down crypto's going to zero. I mean, just take it into perspective right now, okay? When me and Charlie were in the 2017 Bitcoin bull run, we were salivating for Bitcoin to hit 20K. Bitcoin has been consistently at 2019, 21K for a couple weeks now. And people are complaining and like, that's it. It's a scam. It's all over, and it's just higher highs and higher lows. And looking at the past, this is not going to go away. I mean, the cycle is not just going to come to a halt just because certain people feel a certain way. And the majority of people who are talking bad about crypto and who are just, like really kind of bashing crypto, kicking it while it's down, quite frankly. Um, it's really just morons. Just just talking shit about something that they quite frankly don't know anything about. You know what I mean? Anything to add to that, Charlie, in regards to people crashing the legitimacy of Bitcoin?
They've been doing it for a long time and continue to prove themselves wrong. So, even people in crypto, right? They bash, especially in a bull run, right? They'll bash Bitcoin as much as possible. And it doesn't mean that like the technology improves fast and is Bitcoin's quote unquote technology, the most advanced. Of course it isn't, because it was the first one that existed, right? But because it still runs this market, right? Does that mean you want to see Bitcoin fail? Hell no, right? If you see Bitcoin fail, this entire not the I don't think the entire experiment fails, but almost like 95, 99% of it fails and takes a very long time to come back, right? So for all you other people in crypto out there who are like, yeah, Bitcoin sucks and it's the worst thing ever and all these other cryptos are better, it's like, thank your fucking lucky stripes that Bitcoin brings these bull markets so that you can invest in these other coins that will bring you more returns over certain periods of time, right? So you just got to respect the fact that Bitcoin runs the market, and really what it's doing is it brings confidence to this asset class, really, first and foremost. And so if that confidence is gone, right, you're going to have a hell of a time making money in this market. So Bitcoin is absolutely necessary for crypto, but it's also absolutely necessary for the world. And will there be other cryptocurrencies that build better technology? Definitely. Will there be other cryptocurrencies that bring you more returns over the long term, or even, in short term, or both, right? Definitely. So doesn't mean your whole portfolio needs to be in Bitcoin or anything like that. Maybe you don't even own any Bitcoin because you bought, when in doubt, buy ETH and stuff like that. But it does mean you still have to understand it, and you still have to study it, and you still have to pay attention to it, because everything follows it in this market.
Yep. And then this is just the chart here, as always. Bitcoin's a bubble. This is when Bitcoin was like little over $10, and Bitcoin's dead, crashes down to like 5. And then, yep, Bitcoin's definitely a bubble, went up to 1K, and then it crashed down to, like about $500. And then we went from, this was 2016. This is when me and Charlie got involved in cryptocurrency, is 2016 right here.
Yeah, I was jumping in. I think, you jumped in 2016. I came in 27 or early 2017.
Yeah, well, I literally got in December 2016. So,
Yeah, I think mine was May 2017.
yeah. So basically, I'm better than you.
Except for you gambled it.
I literally bought Bitcoin because I was watching an anime. I'm not even joking.
I love it.
There's an anime called Ajin, and they're talking about how they use this cryptocurrency to anonymously buy like some kind of fake ID or some kind of like there was like a terrorist group using it. And I was like, cryptocurrency, what the hell is that? And I started looking up Bitcoin, and I was like, and I started researching it just because I was watching this anime, Ajin, if you know, for all my weebs out there. And then I bought it, and it was like $800. And then I ignored it, and then it went up big. Let's see, let me look at the chart because I remember it was like in May when I was just like getting my feet wet in Tokyo, and it 20. Let me pull up the chart real quick. See, and then May of 29, yeah, May it went up to like $1,500. Then I think it topped out at like $2,200, and I was just like, "What the fuck? I'm an investing genius," because I went from 800. I bought half a coin for like $400, and then it went up, and I was just like, I was broke still at the time, and I was just like, "Oh my god!" And then, at that time, I got hired by our former company, and then I'm watching this thing grow and grow and grow. And I was just like, what the hell? And then we became buddies. And then I was just like, I was the only one in the office, like, dude, I think this cryptocurrency thing is something.
I literally remember like our first like real conversation. Like we'd obviously had like things in passing when we were in that company, in the early days. But our first real conversation, in my opinion, was like you were literally for like I can't remember how long it was, but it was literally days. You're going around the office talking about this crypto. Everybody was looking at you like you're insane, right?
Yep.
And like I was kind of listening from the corner of my ear, and I was like,
it's onto something.
no, it was just interesting because I think that was in the early summer of 2017, and a few months before that, basically, when I went back to the States, that was when I bought my first Ethereum at $90, and I thought I was late, because it was like $30 a few months before that, and it was $10 a few months before that. So I was like, shit, maybe I'm buying too high, like. Whatever. I'll just put money and I'll expect it to go down. And of course, it went from as soon as I bought it, went from $90 to like 70. I was like, expected it, whatever. I'm gonna forget about it and whatever. Came back like 2 months later, and this is around when we first started talking, and it was $400 per Ethereum, right? So I was like, this thing literally just like did a little bit more than a 4x here in like 2 months. I think I should understand this, right? And so I was starting to study it, and then you were talking about it, and I remember this conversation because like we were on the same kind of island, but like a few desks away and stuff, and you were talking about Ethereum or something like that, and I was like, I think that's the one that I have, right? And you're like, oh, the guy who made it's like right down the street, having a what do you call it, like a meetup at the what is the Tokyo Bitcoin meetup, right? You want to go? And I was like, what does he look like? Because I didn't remember Vitalik's name. I just saw his picture, right? And you showed me his picture. I'm like, yeah, that's the guy. Like, that's how ignorant I was about, people in the cryptocurrency space. And we literally, like, after work, just a couple hours after that, went down 2 blocks, right? To meet Vitalik Buterin in the basement of a fucking bar in Shibuya. And I remember we walked into the door, and Roger Ver was handing out, lanyards and stuff like this. Yep. And you're like, shit, it's Roger Ver. I need to take a picture with him. Roger, can I take a picture with you? He's like, yeah, sure. And I was like, who are you fanboying over? You're like, you don't know Roger Ver? I was like, I have no idea who he is. Which, by the end of that year, we very well know who he was. But it's just kind of crazy how that whole thing transpired. But a lot of our friendship or stuff like that really like thrived during that time, and it was a big fu to the company as well, because as the crypto thing really took steam, is like towards the later part in 2017, we're like long lunches, steak lunches, and we're having a good old time.
we had an Italian boss, and he hated us when we were like like because we would go to this like little steak joint, and we would just talk about crypto for hours, and like we were basically just we were basically plotting our exit from corporate slavery. And crazy, man, how it was crazy how we were just sitting there talking about how we're going to get out and we're going to prove all these idiots wrong, and like we know what we're talking about. And it was just funny. Me and Charlie always talked like, I'm the way I did my sales and stuff was like fire, and Charlie's just like a steady
Long term.
stream. And we're fire and water, and we just like we're just perfect balance. And I quit first, and Charlie's like, "You are crazy." I was like, "I know, but I think I'm onto something." and then after I quit, how long did you quit?
When was it that you quit? I can't remember exactly.
I quit in March 2018.
Okay, yeah, it wasn't too long after. It was September for me.
Really? September?
Yep.
Oh, it seems like. I thought it was sooner.
Nope. September.
Wow.
Yep.
But you left like what, 60 grand on the table when you quit too?
70.
Not that you remember.
Yeah, I think what, at $3,000 Bitcoin at the bottom, or probably at that time Bitcoin was about $7,000. I left 10 Bitcoin on the table there.
Oh man, what a time.
Yeah.
So that's it, guys. We're gonna leave you there. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Peace out.